Hey everybody, welcome to another video. Today we are having fun with KOMETA, or formerly known as Plex Meta Manager. So let's get started. I created a library here just for messing with Plex Meta Manager so that I could create videos, but also if you find yourself kind of struggling, maybe you may want to create a fake library here. Here I have the Scourge of movies, Iron Man, The Avengers. Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, actually, that one wasn't too bad, but I have a bunch of movies here that I don't really like. Thor, something that is part of the iMDB top 250. Also, two of the worst movies, disaster movie, and House of the Dead. Here, this time though, instead of Linux and kind of doing it that way, I have a separate instance here of Plex Meta Manager. And this Plex Meta Manager is following the Windows tutorial from their wiki. And essentially what it does is they just create, you create a folder, and then in that folder you use Git to copy over the Plex Meta Manager installation from their GitHub, and this way if there's updates you just do git pull rather than downloading zip over and over again from the directory that you pulled into, which for me was pmm test. You're going to want to install git bash for Windows. You want to make sure that you have git with limited Unix path installed, and then here you can see the .github. See the pull request template, everything is here. And then lastly, you're going to create a PMMVNV. This is a virtual environment. It's like a sandbox utilizing Python's virtual environment. So the way to do it is, and then you have to install all these requirements here, git Python, num2words, Plex API, all these requests, and go ahead and open command here into the directory. And then you can just type something like this, pmmvnv scripts activate, and you hit enter and you get something kind of like this. And again, you just want to follow their wiki tutorial. May or may not have changed given the nature of how things change and a video is static. Now, once you have this is where I'm going to type, Python, right? There's Python 3.10. Always one step below the latest because sometimes dependencies don't get updated to the latest Python. And then Plex Meta Manager.py. So if you kind of are new to this and you're like, well, I don't really know what Plex Meta Manager is, best to go to that conceptual guide first. And then there's a lot of info to cover there. And then, come back to this guide, which is more kind of specific. We're going to start this video by doing the most prominent thing that Plex Meta Manager is known for, creating overlays. But before we can create those overlays, there's something I want to cover in terms of a script called grab all posters. That is something we're going to do to initially set up our assets directory. And I'm going to cover exactly what an assets directory is later, and more importantly, why you need it. So let's go and run grab all posters. So what the hell is grab all posters? Well, it's a script by Chaz Larson. He goes by the name of Mr. Carrot on Discord. And he created a bunch of scripts, but today we're only going to cover grab all posters. Before you start Plex Meta Manager, you have all these movie posters, right? My recommendation is, and this is kind of how I do it, is I go through the posters and I choose the posters I like. If I don't want to see stupid Batman and I want to see Heath Ledger, right, I'll switch it. I'll be like, okay, this is what I want this as the poster. The reason being, guys, is once you start putting overlays on things, you really can't go into Plex anymore. And it's actually a warning on their wiki where you can't go in and start changing posters in here, unless you remove there's, once overlays get added, there's like an overlay label like that you can remove. And then when Plex Meta Manager runs, it'll grab that new poster you used and put overlays on top. But really what they want you to do is get in the habit of assets, which grab all posters is going to help us set up. Really, when you start creating and choosing and picking and choosing, let's say I want Scarlett Johansson there instead of all the Avengers. I don't know. Once you put overlays, you don't want to mess inside of Plex, because Plex Meta Manager as a script can't tell what you're doing behind its back. So the assets directory it's basically the source of truth. So when Plex Meta Manager is applying an overlay, if you don't have an assets directory and you don't call its function assets for all in the configuration file so that everything in that specific library utilizes assets, what ends up happening is you're going to have instances where you might, change it on Plex, and then when Plex Meta Manager runs, it will put it back to the poster that it first saw. Then you're kind of like, damn, how am I going to change that stupid poster that I don't want to see anymore? You see, there's two benefits if you use an assets directory. One is obviously avoiding that. The other is obviously avoiding anyone who perhaps changes the poster on you on the scraper side, and then it grabs a new poster. So there's a lot of reasons why they give you that control, but there's a lot more customization that you have to do on your end to make sure that you can keep that control. Before we get into it, let's go over some of the options for grab all posters. So this config file, this environment file that the scripts use is essentially for all his scripts, but for the purposes of grab all posters, the only really important one is TMDB key, Plex token, obviously. You want to put the libraries here. You want to put your TMDB key here. Again, this is what's going to grab posters for grab all posters. And then finally, I would say just this block right here. These 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 sections, right? So what to grab? Let's see if I can. What to grab? Do you want to grab the season? So not, depending on the library, if you have TV shows in there like I do, seasons are season posters. Okay. Do you want to get the season posters? Do you want to grab the season episodes? Commentary on the episodes. If you're using Plex Meta Manager for episode overlays, perhaps for resolution, etc., you want to hit 1 on this. But if you're using Title Card Maker, which is another program I cover on this channel, then personally, I keep grab episodes off. And the only time where, again, I don't really care for it to source the episode images, because I'm going to let Title Card Maker do that and function as the source for those source images for the episodes. Because remember, Title Card Maker is going to create title cards. And then if you want, like, for example, for me, the only instance that I see where I like episodes is not for ratings, episode overlays for ratings. I don't really care about Plex Meta Manager's overlays on episode specific stuff over, let's say, the show's main top level poster, is if you have a mixed and matched collection. Like, for example, I have Looney Tunes, right? 700 plus episodes, 1,000 episodes. All of them are not Blu-ray, right? And Warner Brothers, unfortunately, didn't do it justice. So in that instance, perhaps it's useful for me to not only see the Title Card Maker, image on the episodes, but to also see Plex overlay the resolution on those title cards somewhere. That would be very interesting. So that's something that I do selectively. And so that's why I have grab episodes off. Grab backgrounds, again, the background picture, only current. If you set this to 0, what's going to kick in is this one, poster depth. So it will grab more than one poster. Now, this is if you want to already have the option of the posters downloaded, so you could just mix and match really quickly. If you have the JPEG, poster 1, poster 2, poster 3, you could just rename poster 1 to poster. Done. You don't have to download. This program will take care of all that for you. Now, include collection artwork. Obviously, the collections that get made, do you want to get those artworks, right? You can also use that as a way to just replace those artworks rather than utilizing whatever defaults there are. Only collection artwork. The script will grab artwork for only collections, and artwork for individual items will not be grabbed. So again, then if you just do collection artwork, it will invalidate all these things above it. artwork for specific collections. And poster depth, again, is if you do 8, it will download 8 posters, provided that only current is 0. Find overlaid images, you can hit 1. And this is where, if you have overlaid images and you want to keep those, you could hit 1 here. So again, I haven't found a reason to utilize this, but I'm sure there's a reason. That's why it's in there. This one is interesting. I like to do asset naming equals 1. Use asset folders 1. Use subfolders, meaning 0 to 9, A to Z, collections, others. So I hit that to 1. Assets by libraries. So I may as well. So this will create assets and then the library names. And then inside of those names, it will create subfolders. Inside of those folders, it will create the asset folders. So for the movie's name. And inside of those, it will use the asset naming. So ironically, this is going bottom to top rather than top to down. Asset directory, what do you want to call it? Assets. Poster directory, extracted, current poster directory, current poster. This is assuming you're not using asset directory naming. So, right here. If asset directory naming is on, the next 3 are ignored. So if this value was 0, meaning, don't name them, it's going to slap those in a separate folder. Now, again, poster download. If you hit 0, it'll create a script rather than downloading. You want to hit 1. Folders only. Again, this will just make folders and not download anything. And lastly, threaded downloads, I set to 1. Now, one comment I want to make is when I first ran, grab all posters, it didn't grab all the posters. Now, is it the fault of the script, as explained to me? No. The script doesn't have a mind of its own. The script is simply literally going to Plex and going, hey, Plex, give me everything you have from 2 years ago. By default, it shows like this. Default years back 2. Plex hands it over to grab all posters, and grab all posters downloads. It's basically like it's just like a, not to make it sound bad, but it's kind of like a mindless worker. It'll just do what it's told. Whatever it's given, it'll save it. It'll put it in a folder. It's not going to ask questions. So for whatever reason, if your Plex library is not picking up, by default, I would just say maybe this should just be set a lot further back, or maybe this should be on the README for the script, but I get it because it's a very Plex specific behavior. But you see this brand new library created with these movies. Grab all posters did not grab all these posters, regardless of me literally just creating this library. So again, Plex is very screwy with these dates. So you probably want to set your default years back to like 52 or, 12, whatever. I just do 10, honestly, or 12. So, you could set it to 10 for the initial run. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And then you can run it. And then let's run that right now. Okay, we're going to run grab all posters now for the library with the 10 years default back. So this is going to be like the initial run that you're going to do. Now, it's going to load everything. It's going to download 17 movies, as you can see. And it processed for the TV shows, 3 of 3 shows it picked up, 3 of 3 seasons. And it processed, again, 3 seasons and 3 shows. So that's 6 of 6 there. And then for movies. So that's how TV shows works a little different. It goes by seasons and the number of shows. So the number is going to look a little odd there. But now you can see we get gets created as an assets directory. And here you could see with the use libraries command, remember, and then we have the subfolders. And then inside of the subfolders, we have these. These are the posters. And these are going to be in the assets directory. The assets directory. And I'm going to just basically take this. I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to literally put it in my config file right here. And so that's in there. And remember from the Plex Meta Manager config, the assets have to be used in the file block. We have the asset directory config assets, asset depth 2, asset folders true, and also per library movies PMM TV shows PMM. Remember, these have to match the name. This is an overview from my Plex video, but these have to match the name on the given libraries you want to affect. And then if in their operations, assets for all equals true. So now that I have that, I'm going to utilize under config assets, all of these. Now, quick comment on having 2 instances of Radarr and Sonarr for HD and 4K. If you have a library, okay, like Movies PMM, if Movies PMM had your HD library in addition to 4K titles, then you only need to grab assets for Movies PMM and not Movies PMM HD. I'm going to say that again. If Movies PMM already has the root path for your Movies HD library, this, inside of it, so you could see the HD movies as well, then you only need to define the assets once. You don't have, it's not going to be like, wait, where's the Movies PMM, it's 4K library if your Movies PMM already has 4K movies in there. So it only cares about one thing. Just remember this. It only cares about the movie name being there. That's it. It doesn't care what the library name is at the top. It doesn't matter. As long as it's that movie's name is somewhere, those posters will be consistent across all the libraries. And that brings us to a third major benefit that I didn't mention earlier, but assets will also make sure that your posters that you choose for one library are matching the other ones. So you're not getting this situation where your HD library has all these different posters with overlays on them, and your library has all these different posters with overlays on them. You can make sure that everything is consistent. The posters you choose, people who have access to your HD library can see the same poster. So again, you only need to define one. In my setup, I put the HD libraries as part of the 4K for myself at home. And then for other people, there is a separate Movies HD library, TV shows HD library, right? But for me, and okay, I could show it right here. See, TV shows HD, Movies HD. So notice I have movies. This was covered earlier, but TV shows. So my TV shows have 4K TV shows, but notice there's no TV shows Ultra HD because this has the Ultra HD root path for TV shows, TV-UHD. And then it also incorporates the same directory as TV shows HD. So I only really need, in order to get all the TV show seasons assets, I only need to specify this one, right? Because it covers TV shows and it covers TV shows HD. TV shows, kids, and anime, obviously, yes. If I don't have those in one library that's already being grabbed by grab all posters, then I should define those separately. But in this case, because TV shows already incorporates TV shows HD, I can just choose that one, and that will grab all the root paths. Again, all we're trying to do is grab all the posters for all the shows and movies. That's it. So if one library covers 2 libraries or 3 libraries or 4 libraries, then that's all you need. But if you have a library that no other library has directories for, so for example, let's say I just called it TV shows Ultra HD, right? There's no HD library in there. Then I would have to do TV shows HD, TV shows Ultra HD in terms of putting it into grab all posters under that libraries tag. So that's one thing to be aware of. So even though there's these names and it can maybe be confusing if you start renaming things, and really you don't really want to rename your structures once you've really got that handle down. But for me, that's kind of how I choose to do it. I just want to see everything, right? I don't want to only see, Ultra HD TV shows, and I don't want like 20 tabs. So that's why I do it that way. So Movies PMM, you don't have to do the folder, the library naming. You could disable that. And then in that case, your assets would simply be, instead of asset depth 2, it would be asset depth 1. If you don't set this to 2, if you use library names, it will not work. So now that you have your assets, you have your config file here, and we're going to keep referencing this config file. But again, If you don't understand what Plex Meta manages or its behavior, please check out the other video in the description. This is strictly Plex Meta Manager testing and messing around with stuff. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put overlays on all these posters. So remember, Plex Meta Manager has collection files, overlay files. There's also something called metadata underscore files. There's also playlist files right here. Okay. And again, it could be on a library. You can define things on a library basis, or the settings option, which will define things on a more global basis in terms of settings, in terms of, you know, anything that's not covered for the library. That will be more specific to the wiki. And I will be referencing the wiki as well. So we're creating audio codec, resolution, video format, and we're going to run these as the overlay files. Okay. And we're going to see what we come back with. And here you can see that it finished running. We take a look at some errors. We have some very generic errors here in terms of there not being an iMDB, a warning, mal warning, notifier isn't set up. Let's take a look at what happened on the side of Plex when we ran it. Okay, so what do we got? We got the audio. So everything has the audio, Dolby Digital. Everything has the resolution, 480p, right? We have some 1080p files, some 720p files. We have a mix here of various things. And we also have the video format. So for some, it will say at the bottom here, web. For the others, it didn't say anything because it couldn't detect it. Here it detected Blu-ray. But for the most part, for some of them, see, this is what happens. This is why you have to follow trash renaming. So those pick up. See, this is what happens. It won't pick up certain things because these files weren't named like that in the slightest. So again, for the Dark Knight, if we take a look, you see there is no source indicated. And that's why the trash renaming guide, which is another video that I already have, and I'll have it in the description, that you should check out if you haven't already before you even attempt to do Plex Meta Manager. So this is what we get. Okay. Whenever you're defining PMM, which is the default template, right? It's a default template that's already been pre-created for you, ready for overlay files to apply overlays. And we're going to get into custom files, custom collections, dynamic collections, template files. We're going to get into all those separately in a later section. But right now we're just using the defaults. These are pre-made ones on the repo that technically have there is a local if you will, it's saved in your local. So if you go under defaults here, we can see overlays. And so this is essentially whenever you type PMM resolution, it's essentially just utilizing this file here. See, resolution edition overlay. You see external templates, PMM templates. But this is essentially what those are doing. So if we want to remove, let's say I want to remove Dolby Digital AAC. I don't like seeing the audio anymore. Remember, every time Plex Meta Manager generates, and this was mentioned in my previous video, that's why I'm saying remember, hoping you watch that. But it generates an image, right? These are images that are saved. You see, this is an image file. So this isn't dynamic. This is literally applying information to an image and then feeding Plex that image. So anytime we change the overlays or anything, an entirely new image is created, which leads to something called Plex bloat. If you have enough library files and you tinker with overlays constantly, for that, there's Plex image cleanup. That is in the other video. And I mentioned that in the concept guide, what's happening. So we're not going to cover that here. But we're just going to cover how to remove Dolby Digital. So now I want to remove Dolby Digital, right? I don't want it there. So I'm going to head over to my Plex Meta Manager config here. And I'm just going to start getting rid of the audio codec. I don't want it there. Okay. There we go. Okay, so now all I want is the resolution and the format. And let's get rid of the format. I don't even want that because it's not on all of them. In fact, let's just get rid of the format. Okay, Blu-ray. So let's pay attention to these two. Suddenly, Blu-ray, and as good as it gets. So we'll actually do that. We'll just remove the video format because that makes more sense for this example. So now we're going to do it that way. And why is this here? That should not be there. Bad. That should not have been there. Okay. Save that out, and let's check out what happens when we run Plex again. Upon running that, you can see that the suddenly one, the web or the Blu-ray is gone, right? And for as good as it gets, the web is gone. Let's go ahead and just hit this for posterity's sake. Let's see what goes on. Notice now I have two posters, and this is what I was talking about. Every time an overlay aspect changes or something, it creates another image, right? Because it's only images. And then the old one is there. Plex image cleanup will remove the one that's not used, but that's not covered in this video at all. It's just mentioned. If we check these movies, we can see that all of them will have an overlay label. Okay, every single one will have an overlay label. This label can be removed by simply doing remove labels, remove overlays to true. And then those will not be there. And Plex Meta Manager will put back all the original posters from your assets directory. One of the next things I want to do is I want to show you what happens once you've applied overlays. And then you start, you're going, you're not listening to my warnings. And you're like, okay. And you start going, I'm going to change all these posters manually because I'm a big boy. I'm going to change all these posters. I'm going to use custom posters, okay? You're going to be like, oh, look at all these amazing posters I have in Plex. I got my Guardians poster, etc., because you weren't paying attention to the video. You weren't paying attention to the little warnings that I've been giving not to touch it once the overlays are on there. And then your script will run either on a schedule by itself if you have it constantly running in terms of a daemon mode of some sort, but in this example, I'm running it manually. So the script will run, okay? It's going to run, it's going to do its thing, and you're going to have all these different posters. Imagine, for the sake of this example, I kept them all the same poster. But imagine you have all these different posters you chose after you already put overlays on there. And then, well, let's see what happened. So the script is done, and usually the changes are seen right away. And yet, nothing. Nothing changed. You're like, what the hell? Where's my overlays? If you look here under Assets Warning, it says very simply, so-and-so has an overlay and will be updated when overlays are run, meaning Plex Meta Manager already thinks there's overlays on here. You're like, wait, no, there's not. Yeah, because remember, the labels tag is still here. So it will rightfully think if you go behind its back and you start using Plex to change things, which you're not supposed to. You should use your assets directory that I mentioned. It will think that there's already overlays because the overlay label has been there. So it thinks, oh, you're using, he's just using this old image I made, right? As good as it gets. This is the one he's using. So there's no point in me changing the overlay. It doesn't know you changed it to the damn different picture, okay? So that's something really important to note. But what happens if I were to, let's say, remove the overlay manually, right? Let's remove the overlay for that one. Let's just remove it. And let's remove the lock as well while we're at it, just so that it can do that. And then let's remove the overlay for the Avengers, leave the lock, and see what occurs in terms of that behavior. So we're going to run the script now. And let's see what happens. Let's see what happens to these guys. So again, we've removed the overlay. So now Plex Meta Manager should be able to run. And there you go. Look at that. It's applied an overlay. But notice what's happening here. Wait a minute. It took the poster from the assets directory. That's right. So the assets directory is the source of all truth. Interesting. So it didn't keep the one that I put in Plex. It took the one from the assets directory. That is very important to notice. Something really important to notice that. And again, now if we check under the images in the poster, we will see that even although it recreated the image, it realized that that image already existed. So it didn't bloat necessarily. It didn't just create another one and another one. It realized, hey, wait a minute, there is already an image there with these values. So it grabbed the older one. So again, for, let's say, for Age of Ultron, right? Let's look all the way at the bottom. Age of Ultron has the 480p, the Dolby Digital, right? So notice that. So let's go ahead and, God, I don't even like Age of Ultron right now. Let's do this one, Alibi. I think it'll have less posters. So here's the 720p Dolby Digital. Okay. We're going to remove, oh, and let's check the labels on this real quick, what it did. Okay, so it did actually manage to apply the labels again. So the lock doesn't matter. That's something to note. Let's go ahead and remove for Alibi just to really confirm that it didn't create another image. So right now we only have one 720p HD Dolby Digital. Okay. So let's go ahead and remove the overlay label. In fact, I don't even think the lock matters. And let's go ahead and run that again. So we're going to run it again. Again, we only have 17 movies, so this should be very quick and easy. And let's pay attention to Alibi here. Okay, there it is. It's created the, you notice it's put that correct one. Let's take a look at the posters. Let's look at the labels first. Overlays there. Posters. And again, it detected. It's like, hey, wait a minute. You already have a poster that utilizes exactly 720p HD and Dolby Digital. So it's not creating multiples of those posters if it already exists. Interesting. That's something I didn't even know. So I'm learning with you guys. How cool is that? There is an option for the config file called. So if we go under the config file and we open it up, there is an option where you can put reapply overlays to true. What this will do is it will force the application of overlays, meaning it will ignore the fact that this label is there outright, and it will always keep adding overlays, aka it will keep regenerating images even if nothing changed in your overlays. So for the sake of going back to more examples, let's go ahead and change all these posters, and let's go ahead and do reapply overlays. So remember, it's going to source from the assets directory, so it's going to change all these manual ones I did, right? Because the assets directory will always be supreme. And then I just want to set it back to the way it was. Let's go ahead and do that. Now we have remove overlays set to true. Remember, let's take a look at disaster movie. The labels are there, overlay, poster. These are the posters currently that exist, just Dolby Digital for that one, and the manual. So here we go. We're going to run it and run. So let's see what it's going to do. Now, if my guess is correct, it will remove all these blues, put the original posters back, and add the correct 720p and audio on there. And it did. Look at that. So it's sourced from the assets directory. Let's make sure it didn't create another one. I am curious about that, actually. Yeah. And it recognizes, again, you've already created one of these before with those exact same overlays. So it's not duplicating on that either on reapply overlays. So every time reapply overlays is running, it doesn't seem to be creating multiples of the same thing. Anyways, we saw the behavior of what it's doing with reapply overlays there. Now, obviously, if I were to change one thing like remove Dolby Digital, then I'm pretty sure it's going to create a second image. But in this case, I already had the image. It's not creating any more bloat for reapply true. So we're back to where I needed to be. Now we're going to move on to some more experimental examples. One thing I want to note about the whole removing the overlays, again, if you remove the overlay, remember we showed that the image was manually changed in Plex. We removed the overlay, and then it added the one from the assets directory, right? If you don't have an assets directory and you remove the overlay, then what the default behavior will be is it will take the poster that you used. In our case, it was, change poster and manually in Plex. It will download that poster as if it never saw it for the first time. If it were the way where we did it this way, we removed the labels, we don't have an assets directory, and we applied an overlay, right? If we applied the overlays, then it would apply the overlay to this file, and you would see overlays under this change poster and manually in Plex. I just wanted to make mention of that because that's particular behavior that only happens when you're not using an assets directory. To better show this, I have went ahead and removed all the overlays using remove overlays set to true, which I'm now going to set to false. And I have also removed the assets directory from being used. Notice under operations, it is completely blank for movies. No longer going to utilize assets for all equals true for that. Now I'm going to show you in the instance that you're like, well, what if I don't want an assets directory? Then what kind of things can I expect? We're going to cover that next. One thing to note is under the config overlays, if you don't have an assets directory, by default, mine are blank right now because I started with an assets directory. Well, you're not even going to have these in there until you do your first run. So in the instance of that, let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. Okay. We're going to run it with the overlays without an assets directory and watch what happens here. Remember when I first said choose all the posters that you like? Because if you don't, again, if you aren't using an assets directory, in a way, it kind of does create an assets directory for you. These are like sort of a pseudo-assets directory. But if you mess with the overlay labels a lot, you can kind of, we'll get into it, you could really mess with this system. Because what happens is every time you remove the overlays, it'll write back to these folders. Whereas with assets, Plex Meta Manager cannot edit the assets at all. It can't touch that folder. So there's less likelihood for errors, which is actually a pretty good thing. So now let's see what happens when we run overlays for this script. And let's see how it works when you don't have an assets directory. It's going to create those overlays, which is making right now. We're going to start seeing it processing. And notice how the folders are being added to temporary. And then they're getting put into the movies PMM original posters pseudo sort of directory, the assets directory, right? This is notice the names are very random. If you don't have like a Explorer viewer for like your Linux or Unraid, it's going to be very hard for you to tell what's what. You can't really easily change posters that way. It's kind of not that great. But now we have this. Okay. Now remember, if we change one of these, right? If I change the poster and I go, okay, change Ant-Man manually. Remember this guy? Remove the overlay tag, hit save. Let's go ahead and run it. Let's see what happens. So now we've removed the overlay. Now pay attention to this folder here. And if I hit, if I start doing it this way, we're going to run it again. It's going to actually apply overlays right to this one because now it thinks there's no overlay. Notice that. And notice right here, it friggin' replaced Ant-Man's poster. So that's one way you can still utilize the Plex GUI. And of course, we also have one for change poster manually in Plex. If it's not already clear to you, the assets directory just gives you more control. It gives you more control over which posters you want to choose. And moreover, it creates that level of control in terms of creating an easy to understand naming system like the Avengers background poster. And furthermore, with assets, you can enable what's called, it's a property called dimensional naming. So if it detects certain width parameters or height parameters, so for posters, for example, if the height of an image is greater than its width, it's going to know that without you having to call it poster, it will automatically call it poster. So you could literally just drag a file in there. And when it runs, it will automatically rename that file based on the dimensions of the image. For example, if you have a file that's just called 01975575 and its width is greater than the height, right? In the example here, the width of this is greater than its height, right? 1920 by 1080, for example. It will know that, oh, that's going to be a background for this, the Avengers movie. And of course, when you edit these assets, regardless of if in the config file here, regardless of if you change any of these variables, it will know to rerun and recreate those assets based on your updated poster. So that's also a really nice little touch that you have there in terms of assets. Whereas with the normal backup procedure, it won't update those assets even if you replace it under the overlays movies original poster. It won't automatically update unless you change the overlay. And again, the most major advantage being different libraries will utilize the same assets, so it will look consistent in terms of the overlays and the posters used. Let's try to create some collections now in Plex Meta Manager. So everything has a defaults file. Now these default files is a pre-created set of either collection files or overlay files, playlist files. There's not really pre-configured metadata files, but that's obviously because those target metadata, which would be very specific to your library and the tags in them. But anyways, we're going to take a look, for example, the collections here. And let's do iMDB charts. So here is basically what a collection looks like. Collections supported library types, so some will only apply to TV shows, right? And some will apply to both, right? So not necessarily all the template files apply. So make sure to check out the individual pages for whatever template you're using for not just things like separators, which are basically placeholder cards that separate, things. So here, notice this genre collection tells you, hey, after this point, the genres are coming. But it also gives very specific template variables. What are template variables? Well, simply it's something that allows you to alter these PMM default template, basically default collection files. The template variables are things that you as the user can tweak based on certain keys, such as vertical align, bottom, top, etc., something like this. So all of these usually have their own template variables that are specific to what they can do for certain collections or overlays. To change the separator colors, right? So for example, here you could put template variables right here. If you see this, you can put movies, collection files, PMM separator award, right? This will add a separator, and then template variables and separator style purple. So this will use the purple separator style. And then you can see all the colors of the separator styles. Again, style meaning color, right? Aqua, amethyst. So the separators, again, remember, these are placeholders for before certain collections. So usually, like if even for countries, for example, countries, you could just do not use the separator by doing use separator false. But again, if you want to add the country separator, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. Again, it's just a handy way to, once you have dozens of collections, how to figure out, the patterns. That's all separators do. We're talking about ratings. So for example, here, there's template variables where you can change rating 1, rating 2, rating 3. So rating 1 can be, oh, I want rating 1 to be the critic score, and rating 2 the picture. I want it to be based off of the audience score. And then, oh, for rating 2's image, I want it to be RT Popcorn. But rating 1, I want it to be iMDB. So it's like little variables that can change in the templates. So in terms of collections, I want to once again go to chart and iMDb charts. And of course, if you want to follow along with what I'm doing here, feel free to just head over to the Plex KOMETA Manager local walkthrough. And again, I am doing basically I'm starting it right around here, which is essentially, let's create a few sample configuration collections, right? We head over to what this essentially can do. So as defined here, the second, which is PMM iMDB, will create popular, top 250, and lowest rated. And again, here we can see the collections section. What does it do? What does it make? Again, it will make iMDB popular. The key for this is popular, top, lowest. And again, we can see very specific things. So it's telling us, okay, this is how you set it up. Now the template variables is, again, used to manipulate the file in various ways to slightly change how it works. So there's file specific templates and there's shared templates across, template variables across all. That's not necessarily file specific. So for collections, there's shared variables here. A lot of it includes Sonarr, Radarr, missing, tags, etc. And then there's file-specific template variables. So the default will create 3, okay? So we're going to do that right now. We're going to check into Plex. Right now I have nothing. I just have the default Plex stuff, right? That's horror, romance, all that stuff. So we're going to do PMM iMDB. We're going to leave overlays alone. We are done covering overlays. If you want more coverage on the types of overlays and ratings, please refer to the overlays PMM defaults if you're using defaults, or the files and builders to make your own overlay files. Here we are now discussing collection defaults and things related to collections. So next up we are, and by the way, we're back to using the assets directory. Just in case I didn't make that clear, we are now using the assets directory. So everything you see will be utilizing that. Though for collections and things of that nature, we didn't have to worry too much. So again, here we go. We're just going to go ahead and grab and just hit -R for run. And we're going to run it. And now this time it's going to make collections for us. Yep, you can see right here running iMDB popular collections. It's looking through the 100 ID charts for the movie, and then it's going to see if there's anything on here. And you can already kind of see things shifting around here. I do have 2 movies. It says 2 movies processed and added. Here we go. We could see Shawshank and The Dark Knight. So right there we have iMDB popular. So it's going through, it's checking, do you have Hunger Games? Do you have Deadpool 3? Really? Deadpool 3? Okay. I'm not a Marvel fan, guys, but it's checking if we have all of those. Now, there we go. iMDB popular has been created. IMDb top 250. Oh, there we go. IMDb popular. IMDb top 250 is there. And so we're just kind of seeing kind of what's happening with these things here. And I'm going to keep this window completely let me move this up slightly. Oops, sorry about that, guys. I'm trying to keep the command line present as this is happening. So just so that someone can sort of see the command line as well and see the changes happening here. So IMDb popular, IMDb top 250, and what was the other one again? It was like the worst, lowest rated. I don't know if I'm gonna have. I do believe I put disaster movie. That should create the lowest rated one. But we're gonna have to see here. Here we go. It's processing lowest rated. So I think disaster movie is on there. I think it has to be on there. I made sure to get the, oh yeah, there they are. You see that? House of the Dead disaster movie, IMDb lowest rated, just got created here. See this right here? So it went ahead and created those, and IMDb popular, IMDb top 250. Let's take a look. It should put the correct poster. So right now it's doing what Plex does. It's taking the default poster. So notice how it moved it up right here. And now it applied the lowest rated poster. Ta-da, you know, there it is. So there we go. We got the lowest rated, the popular, the top 250. Now when we click on it, so one thing to note is for right now, disaster movie, all these are showing in the library, okay? And if we go under TV shows, remember, I'm not messing with TV shows. Let's just stick to collections, and you can apply TV show collections however you want. But for now, we're sticking just to movie collections here, and exclusively movie collections. I'm probably not going to be covering TV show collections and TV show season overlays and all that. It's very similar to movies. If you want to do that, you should be able to translate it to TV shows quickly. Let's take a look. IMDb lowest rated. Yeah, there it is. List of IMDb's lowest rated movies. Automatically, it created that for us. Popular. There we go. Shawshank, The Dark Knight is in there. And again, if we hit the edit here, you can see it's put the sort title as exclamation 020. So one interesting thing to note about this whole thing, the sort title is obviously alphabetical. And also this is considered something called collection section. We can see that all default collection section files have a collection section attribute. These attributes determine the order of the various sections and can be set by customizing your config. So what does this mean? Well, if we take a look here, the default ordering is like this. Seasonal will always be zeros. And again, it's always an exclamation with 3 digits, an underscore, and then the name of the default collection. So this is kind of the order. This is kind of what happens first. Seasonal will always show up first. Basic, then AnyList, then IMDb, then Flix, then etc. So if we were to inject, let's say, a seasonal, it would show up somewhere well before these ones, right? So the popular here is 020, 020. So if we wanted to organize it by the default sections, all we would have to do is just change it to like exclamation mark 119, because remember, it matches to up to 3 digits. So if 1 comes before 2, whatever is set for sort title 119 would be before resolution, for example. So that's something to just note in terms of sorting collections. Labels, PMM, it has the PMM label. It has a custom poster rather than the Plex one. And again, collection mode is the library default, how the items are displayed on the library tab. So if we go under show collections and their items, see that? But if I were to hide items which are in collection, hit save. There we go. Now the hide items aren't in there. See, now we only have those in there. But again, that's just something that you may or may not want to do. For myself, I will do show collections and their items. So there we go. Okay, so that's how we add a simple PMM default collection. In this case, we used IMDb charts. I want to discuss something in light of collections, and it's going to cover a really peculiar Plex behavior as it pertains to collections. Let's talk about default Plex collection behavior in terms of libraries. So if we look at our edit and advanced in collections, I have hide items which are in collections, but the default behavior is show collections and their items. Now let's see what that looks like when I run essentially a collection file in terms of the PMM defaults to create collections for this library that you see right in front of you. To start with, we're going to run PMM franchise. What this is going to do is it's going to find whichever ones have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whichever ones have essentially the title and the sequels, and it's going to create collections for them. So we're going to run that first, and that's just considered the franchise. So here we're running the franchise Plex Meta Manager collection creator. It's going to take a little time to run through all that. And by the way, if you notice here, I accidentally set collection mode to hide. So under the library tab, they don't show, and it looks like PMM didn't create them. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove that true, or alternatively, just remove the variable. And now we can rerun Plex Meta Manager, and it will create collections. So be careful, guys. So here we can see that Plex Meta Manager has, with the PMM franchise, has created these collections from TMDB. The Avengers collection, Captain America, the Harry Potter collection, and is showing it all in line. The Iron Man collection, followed by all the movies. The Lord of the Rings collection, followed by the Lord of the Rings, right? So let's say you're somebody who does not want to show these movies in the library, right? If they're in the collection, why should you have the collection and then each of these movies showing? So we're going to do something. We're going to manage the library here. And instead of show collections and their items, we're going to do hide items which are in collections. So let's take a look, and let's go ahead and just scan the library files to show those changes. Now, this is what has happened here. Harry Potter has disappeared, okay? Avengers has disappeared. But take a look. Lord of the Rings is still there. What? I know. Why is that still there? Let's see if the collections tag tells a different tale. Now take a look at what's happening here. Notice that the Lord of the Rings did not hide. It's still showing as true in the library. And so now why is that? Now, if we go to collections and we look at iMDb top 250, we can see I made it this way, hide the collection and show its items so that I can explain to you the default Plex behavior and all the complexities of these conflicts that we get when we get movies in multiple collections like iMDb top 250, right? So we use PMM iMDB to create this. And then obviously I change this collection mode, hide this collection, but show its items. So even though we have Lord of the Rings set to the library default, which is hide items in collection, Plex defaults to showing items that are in one or more collections where one of the other collections is set to show and the other is set to hide. We have the Lord of the Rings collection, and then we have iMDb top 250, which have the Lord of the Rings both in them. So the one that wins out is going to be the one that says show, which in this example is iMDb top 250. So now that's interesting because it poses the question, well, how do we make it so that we can show exactly the ones that we want to show? I want my collection item movies to be hidden if they're a part of a franchise or a collection in line with the library. And how do I do that if those movies are in a collection like iMDb Top 250, where I want all the individual movies to show on my library and in the collection, while still respecting the hide attribute for movies that are already in their own collections? Now, similarly enough, if we take a look at the Incredible Hulk here, it has no collection, right? Instead of just the franchise, we were to also do Plex Meta Manager Universe. Okay. And Universe creates universe collections. So now let's run that and see what occurs. And pay attention to the Incredible Hulk, okay? So we pay attention to the Incredible Hulk. Notice the Incredible Hulk disappeared, right? Now you might be thinking, what the heck, where did that go? Take a look here. We have under Library, we can see Universe Collections, okay? Middle-earth Marvel Cinematic Universe. Notice under Marvel, it swallowed the Incredible Hulk, right? It took it because, yes, Incredible Hulk is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But Imagine for a moment if it's like, okay, wait, I still wanted to show something that's not in a franchise collection of its own, but that got swallowed up by the collection that Plex Meta Manager created, which doesn't seem fair, right? So you could change hide items in this collection to show this collection and items, which would show everything, kind of defeat the point, or just hide this collection but show its items. So you could hide it from the library and then it'll show all of it. But then you defeat the library tab showing that collection in line with the library, which is kind of sad. This whole thing is for how items in the collection are displayed on the library tab. So if we were to say, okay, show this collection and its items, right? So now it's like we're cluttering everything again with the Avengers, etc. And now notice that's another problem. Just to show Hulk, I have to now, because the Avengers is in the Avengers collection and Marvel Cinematic Universe, suddenly the show from Marvel Cinematic Universe is overwriting the library default, which remember, the library default I put is hide items which are in collection. So now you can see the conflict when titles get introduced into more than one collection, right? So this is where we have a situation where how do I hide the stuff that has a collection like the Avengers and still allow Incredible Hulk to be outside, even though it's in a collection called Marvel Cinematic Universe? How do I make it where we don't count this as a collection? So it will, unless there's more Edward Norton movies, right, which there aren't, that would make an Incredible Hulk collection, just like Harry Potter, just like Avengers, right? And just like the Lord of the Rings collection. How do we show that outside? And moreover, for the ones like the Lord of the Rings here, where I want to hide these, but how do I hide it when IMDb Top 250 is saying, okay, show the items, but hide the collection? And of course, I want IMDb Top 250 to show its items in line with the library that aren't part of collections like Lord of the Rings here, without showing Lord of the Rings in line with the collection, without it being counterintuitive. So there's one situation that we, let's look at Lord of the Rings. In order to fix that, I could theoretically make it so I set a template variable for the PMM IMDb that changes the collection mode from hide this collection but show it items to just hide items in this collection. So then all of a sudden now if you look, the Lord of the Rings collection, right? Notice that those are gone. So that's one way to do it. But then the problem becomes, what about movies that aren't in a collection that are in IMDb Top 250, right? The Dark Knight, Shawshank Redemption. Notice what happens. The Dark Knight, and what happened to the Dark Knight and the Shawshank Redemption? So now those aren't there, right? Because if the IMDb Top 250, we have 4 items, right? We had Shawshank, The Dark Knight, The Lord of the Rings. Now these two have been swallowed up by IMDb Top 250's collection viewing mode. Now I can't see those in the library. So you see things are getting hidden that I don't want hidden, or things are being shown that I don't want shown. How do we deal with this? And for Plex, unfortunately, this is a feature bug request that they haven't fixed since 2018. But thankfully, Plex Meta Manager solves this with Plex Collectionless. And we're going to talk about Plex Collectionless next. Let's discuss Plex Collectionless. Okay, so let's first do this. Let's put IMDb back the way it was. So it was set to hide this collection, but show its items. Hide this collection, but show its items, right? And so all of a sudden, Dark Knight, Lord of the Rings is showing, Shawshank is showing, right? Even though the Lord of the Rings collection is the library default, which is hide items in this collection, it's still showing Lord of the Rings. In terms of how do we handle even, let's say, the Incredible Hulk from not getting swallowed up, how do we make it so that we can see collections in terms of inline in the library, right? And if I have a certain collection set to hide its items, it gets incorporated into there. But also I can make it so that anything that isn't a part of the collections, anything that isn't a part of that doesn't get a franchise collection created, for example, or anything that is in one of these special collections like Marvel Cinematic Universe, Wizarding World, right? These are the universe collections, or the iMDB collections, right? How do we make it so that anything that's in this isn't considered necessarily, for the sake of collections, part of those collections? And the reason that's important is because that's part of the solution. The solution that Plex Meta Manager offers is set every single collection to hide. So no collection, like for example, iMDB will show, oh, okay, hide the collection but show its items. No, every collection will be set to very simply one thing: hide items in this collection. Simple as that. So everything will be hidden. Now, everything will get swallowed up, right? If it's all hidden, Lord of the Rings will get swallowed up. The Hulk will get swallowed up by Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? And then, of course, Iron Man collection, I'm not going to say swallowed up because these will just get hidden as part of the Avengers collection, Iron Man collection. That's normal behavior, right, for those, because, again, they do have a collection folder here. But, of course, the Incredible Hulk then gets tagged as having a cinematic universe collection, so that gets hidden. But we don't want it to be hidden, right? Because it's not in a collection like Iron Man or Avengers. We want it to show if that's the case. Similar for, let's say, if Harry Potter had any spin-offs, there's a part of like the Harry Potter universe, right? The Wizarding World universe, not necessarily in the classify it as in the Harry Potter collection. How can we show that outside, right? So Collectionless, and let's pull it up together, is a great solution by Plex Meta Manager team that is a little strange when you read it at first and you're not really sure why you even need it or for what reason, though I already showed many reasons before. You'll probably understand when you see the behavior of what's going on with it. So for now, let's say Lord of the Rings, iMDB, top 250. Let's do the requirement for Collectionless. One of the requirements is all collections must use the mode collection hide items. So right now, the iMDB top 250 does not do that by the default. It's only doing hide this collection, right? So we're going to do hide items for all of these just to make sure. Now I'm going manually here in doing this, but naturally you can just do collection mode as a template variable for the entire library in the config file to do this. So these universe ones are doing the library default, and maybe that's what these should do. But now, notice we have Lord of the Rings isn't there, all that stuff. Let's focus on the Marvel and focus on the Incredible Hulk, right? That's what we want to really kind of hone in on. So if we were to create a -pmm collectionless, this should be always at the bottom, okay? And hit save. Oh, and my bad. For Marvel Cinematic Universe, I forgot to set the collection attribute to hide this collection as well. So there's that. It swallowed all of those titles. So when we do Collectionless and we run it, pay attention to what occurs with the Incredible Hulk. Let's take a look. So it's created a Collectionless collection right here. But now look at all these other titles that came out of those collections that swallowed them initially. Now that's really interesting, right? There's The Dark Knight. There's Shawshank. And there's the Incredible Hulk, right? And there's Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy. These are also titles that were getting swallowed up by Marvel Cinematic Universe, because I only have one of these. So they weren't making a collection, right? Like Harry Potter collection. So now these are back out. And so look at what Collectionless did. Anything that is not in a collection like Avengers, Lord of the Rings, the Iron Man collection, it shows in line. Look at that. Even though we are hiding for Marvel Cinematic Universe, we said hide all these items. It's still showing items that are inside of it outside, counteracting the default Plex behavior, which is always show, or always show prevails over hiding things. So in order for us to have seen the Incredible Hulk, which is collectionless, we would have had to set this to, remember, as I showed you before, show this collection and its items. Then it would have shown all the Avengers. It would have shown all the Iron Men, right? And that's a problem. We don't want to clutter our library needlessly. That's the magic of Plex Meta Manager and the power of the collectionless library. Let's take a look at The Dark Knight and Shawshank Redemption. They were part of this collection called iMDb Top 250, right? But they got pulled out. Let's take a look at the Wiki Collectionless page for some information as to how this amazing thing works. So let's look at the default values here and take a look. And we have something here called exclude prefix exclamation and tilde. Exclamation and tilde. And notice how on the template side it says this is a default check, check 1. And then there's a check 2, which alphabetizes a collection order called collectionless with a tilde in front of it. And it will put it basically at the end, it'll hide itself at the end of your collections library. So notice for this one, the collection mode is hide this collection, but do show its items. So collectionless is able to force certain titles to show. And so what it's saying is, hey, listen, any title that's in any of these with a sort title that starts with an exclamation mark, right? Exclamation mark IMDb, exclamation mark Marvel, do not count those as being a part of a collection. Okay, they are not a part of that collection. So if that is the only thing they are in a collection for, I want you to add it to collectionless. I'm going to say that again. That exclude prefix is saying if anything is in Marvel or any other collection, Studios, Universe collection, IMDb collection, if that is the only collection it's in, do not count that as a collection item. Meaning, if the Incredible Hulk is the only thing, and it's the only collection it's in is in Marvel Cinematic Universe, don't consider it in this collection. Meaning, it's a little tricky what it's saying, but it's quite genius. It's saying add it to a collectionless library that always will show. And that's really what it's doing. It's stealing. It's kind of going behind Plex's back and counteracting the default Plex behavior, at least until it gets its own collection through another sequel in the future, right? And so with Lord of the Rings, for example, right, we have the Lord of the Rings in the collection, and then we have it in the IMDb Top 250. But the best part is if we have IMDb Top 250 to hide items in this collection, or the library default that I set, hide items in this collection, any movie that's not already in a collection that's obvious in my library won't get swallowed up, and that's the best way I can put it, by a collection and hidden. Like, could you imagine if there's a bunch of movies that I have that aren't in, like, they don't have a franchise, right, to create these collections, but they keep getting swallowed up because how else do I get it to not show the Lord of the Rings or all the Harry Potter movies? If these were, I'm actually surprised Harry Potter's not in the top 250 at all. I'm really shocked by that. I would think it would be. But if Harry Potter was in the top 250, then all of a sudden I would see all of the Harry Potters, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just so that I can show movies like Shawshank, The Dark Knight, that maybe, well, The Dark Knight is an exception, but let's say the Shawshank Redemption, right? There's no sequel to that, so they won't make a franchise collection. So how do I show the Shawshank outside in line with my library tab? That's all that Plex Collectionless is doing. And this confused me for the longest time, because I'll tell you guys this quick secret. I am somebody that I do like to just do, and I'm going to show you, I just like to very simply just do this one, where I just want to see them right next to the collections. I don't know. It's weird. And now that I'm seeing the power of collectionless, I genuinely think I've been converted. I don't think most of my movies aren't collections. I don't watch a lot of sequels or franchise type things, but in the instance I do, Harry Potter is the exception. Then I can do hide items which are in collections, right? And then I have to scan my library again. And then this will just kind of free the clutter. So I am definitely going to do collectionless when it comes to collections officially. So in summary, how do we set up collectionless? We're going to simply add the PMM collectionless tag into the collection files right at the end, right there. And then we're going to make sure that our library default is to hide items in collections. As simple as that. When you run it, Plex collectionless will find all items that are collectionless, and then it will automatically add exclude prefixes to exclude any items that are only in collections like this and nothing else. So if it's only in Marvel Cinematic Universe like the Hulk, it doesn't count. If it's only in iMDb Top 250 collection, it doesn't count as being in the collections. Awesome. So now that we have these, remember we're using an assets folder. So we're going to head on back to grab all posters. And instead we're in the environment file. We're going to remember that only collections equals 0. We're going to set that to 1. And then we're just going to go ahead and do Python grab all posters.py. And so then it's going to determine, 3 collections retrieved, grab the collection posters 3 out of 3. And I wanted to show this as well because I want to be cohesive to you guys, in terms of what you want to do. Grab all posters is something that you want to have on a schedule, whether it's a cron job or whether it's Windows Task Scheduler. How a lot of people run it is through Windows Task Scheduler. And then again, you can see right here, grab all posters is on the task. It runs at 3:50 p.m. every day. Good Lord. You see, if I didn't notice, I would have, I want to do that to AM. And then actions would just be, again, start a program, you point it to your Python, you add the argument there, and of course, which directory is it in? For me, it's in the Plex main scripts directory, and this is how you want to handle it. And then, of course, it will run for me at 3:50 a.m. every day, and it'll automatically grab things. And I have it set to where instead of just the assets folder, I have it mapped to my unraids folder for these assets, and I just have it saving into the unraid assets directly. So no longer do I have to worry about manually dragging it in. It automatically does that for me every day before Plex Meta Manager runs. Because remember, if Plex Meta Manager runs with the overlay and it detects there's no assets, it's going to create the backup folder, right? And it's going to put the posters in there first before it puts overlays on things. So we want to catch things before Plex Meta Manager touches it. That's why grab all posters needs to be automated. In here, you could see collections. So again, we have the library name, right? And then some movies, PMM, collections, and then, collections being the subfolder. Then iMDb lowest rated being technically like the movie name. Again, this is 1, and then this is asset depth is 2. So for iMDb lowest rated, the depth is 2. Again, so here's the poster here. Popular. Here's the poster here. You want to change these posters, make your own? Go crazy. Do that. Again, with assets, not a problem. Just touch it, change it, bop it, and do all that stuff. One of the things people use collections for is also getting missing movies. So, they make collections that, for example, for iMDb Popular, instead of just finding the files in your library, it finds all the iMDb Populars and it lists them up to like whatever number you have for the limit. Let's say that you want to add stuff to Radarr that's not in the collection, right? Or you want to, add your existing ones. You just simply reference it such as this. So for example, there are when you add a movie in Radarr, it shows this screen, right? And start search for missing movies. So Plex Meta Manager also has these by default. So So IMDb chart, one of them is the top 250. It's using an IMDb builder for the top movies. Okay, so this is a collections file. This isn't really using the default, but this is kind of where it's adding the missing. Radarr add missing true. Again, for Radarr and Sonarr purposes, you can even define it per collection key. So we can go Radarr underscore add underscore missing, underscore top, true, underscore lowest, false. So again, as it pertains to PMM defaults and template specific variables, in this case, shared template variables as it pertains to Radarr and Sonarr, you can also define it specifically per key. So in this instance, you could do Radarr add missing and then the brackets with the key, meaning you can override Radarr's add missing attribute of a specified keys collection. So that means in this instance for IMDb, what are the keys we have? Popular, top, and lowest. So you could go Radarr add missing underscore popular, right? True, false. So you can only set it to, oh, I want to add stuff, the Radarr that's the popular stuff, but not the top 250. So you can get even more specific utilizing template variables for not just other settings, but specifically here for Radarr and Sonarr. We are now creating our own collection. Ooh, how fun is this? And how exciting is this, right? So it all starts, I first showed you the behavior of the default collections, right? So there's many you can use, right? In terms of PMM default collections. But besides separators, you can use many default ones here. You can do network collections. You could be like, okay, I want to do one, by NBC and even though this is streaming, I don't know why that's there, but NBC, Disney Channel, etc. For streaming, you can have streaming collections with these posters on them, and that little gear icon means it's a smart collection, which means it's automatically constantly updated. But we're going to really just start at the basic. We're going to make a collection, okay, called Action Only, baby. And in that one, we're going to utilize something to find the action movies, okay? Something to find the action movies, something that can collect data from our library, return that data to Plex Meta Manager, and Plex Meta Manager can put it in like a nice little collections file or a collection for us, and we can add an asset to that collection, right? Like we showed with the IMDb under our assets folder. And that's what we want. So what is that thing called that grabs information? Well, if you look at the wiki, and again, please do read the wiki. These videos are very supplemental, okay? They are not covering everything. They cannot cover everything. It would take me hours and nobody would watch it. Already more than the amount of time it's taking. Now let's talk about the heart of what creates these definition files, whether it be collection definition files, overlay definition files, or even playlist definition files. It's going to be builders. Builders use third-party services to source items to be added to the collection. That's some really key wording right there. So we have all these builders, right? These services, these third-party services. Though in the case of Plex Smart and Plex Dumb, it's more internal. It's not third-party. That's first-party, right? Third-party would be the movie database, TV database, IMDb, Tracked, Radarr, Sonarr. These will grab information, right? And in some template variables for certain collection files, overlay files, you can write to Radarr and Sonarr. You can add tags. You could have Plex Meta Manager write to those things. But for the most part, these are called builders. In our example, we're going to use something called a dumb builder. Why is it called a dumb builder? Well, gee, a dumb builder is something that literally just grabs things once and always requires Plex Meta Manager to run to update it. it is not dynamic builders. It's not a smart builder. So again, a smart builder for Plex is it allows it to make collections that, again, update itself as your library changes. So let's say, for example, instead of House of the Dead, I made a smart collection called Horror, but I added 20 more horror movies. The smart collection would pick up automatically that, oh, he added 20 more horror movies and add them automatically. Whereas a dumb builder will not add them automatically. Okay, does that make sense? So the smart Plex builder versus the dumb Plex builder. And there is a method to utilizing it. You have to use the, again, to define the sort order with the smart label option. And again, you want to also make sure that you're calling, you're referencing the collection by first putting the name of the definition of the collection, stuff like that. There's very specific things there we're going to cover. But for now, we're going to go to the dumb Plex builder. Okay, Plex builder here. So again, we're doing collections. We're naming it action only, baby. And let's take a look at the collections here. So again, I'm referencing the wiki because I want to stay very technical. And so here, they're calling it my collections. Here, I'm just calling it movies. I should technically rename that. And I probably will rename it after. We're going to just call it actions, right? But remember, you can have multiple collections inside of one file. You don't have to have a file per collection. Remember, these can run multiple collections. So you can do, essentially horror in one, you can have a lot of this thing going. Oh, though you don't need to do collections over and over and over again. That's one of those things. That only has to be defined once. And so you can do stuff like that. And then you can have different options here, right? So we could call this horror, baby. Horror, baby. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and do a horror one. So action, horror, and let's do a comedy one. Comedy only, baby. So we have collections, right, in terms of movies, and then we have 3 collections that we wanted to make from the Plex search. And again, that's a dumb builder. So let's take a look. Plex search right here. See that? Plex search. This attribute, what attribute does it work with? It works with movies, TV shows, again. So let's go ahead and just jump to that portion. And again, we can do Plex search, and we can pretty much define how we wanted to utilize that. We can, describe certain modifiers for that. We can limit it by title. It doesn't have to just be, it doesn't have to be just genre, though in my case, I just used genre, right, which is a tag attribute. It looks at the tag, the genre tags. And again, you can use various attributes to scale it down. Okay. But again, Plex search, the bottom says all. But again, we could just do Plex search, or we can even just do Plex all, and then just technically, in terms of this, we don't have to do Plex search. We could just do Plex all and then do filters. Okay, so let's go over filters real quick. Collections, 1080p documentaries. This is the builder right here, isolating or giving us our data of what movies are just documentary. The summary is there, and of course, we're trying to only find 1080p documentaries. So filters you can either use tag filters. So certain tag filters are actor, network, country, genre, and audio language. You can even filter by that. Resolution here is the one that's really notable for this example. So here we put filters resolution. This is a single filter. You can also have what's called multi-filter sets, meaning if anything doesn't have either, that's not action and from Germany, or if it's not a comedy and from France, it will actually be ignored. So anything that doesn't have either this or this won't be a part of whatever collection is being made with the filter. And again, one of the things with filters is they can be super slow. So you really want to attempt to use a smart label collection, a Plex search, or another builder, if possible, to possibly avoid utilizing filters. But here's another collection where someone gave it a iMDB list. If we take a look at this iMDB list real quick, let's head on over to it and let's just take a quick look-see. So it's every James Bond movie, like all of them. But in this collection, this person wanted only Daniel Craig ones. So we just put a filter for the actor tag, Daniel Craig. So the IMDb list builder gives all the movies, and then the filter filters it down further. Obviously, if you used an IMDb list that was only Daniel Craig, that might require just no need for filters. Here's an example where they're doing a Plex search for romance, but they're calling it French romance, but they're filtering it by audio. So that's kind of fascinating. And there's so many more examples here for filters that you really, if you know what you want, then you can try to use your imagination to build it. We're going to do all genre horror. We're going to hit save on that. Okay. Now we have to open up our config file because we have to call that collections file from the config file. So collection file right now we have IMDb. We're going to leave that alone, but we're now going to add something called file. So here we can reference file. We can do a folder. If we have a folder of .yml files of collections and overlay.ymls, or we could do a URL. We could just do PMM to reference that defaults file in our source Git area, or we could just do Git use to run a file hosted on the PMM user configs repo, or repo. We could reference a custom repository that we have on GitHub ourselves. Though it's up to you how you want to do it. You may want to, hold all your stuff online, and that's completely fine too. For this example, we're just sticking very much to local stuff that can be backed up, with regularity. But of course, if you were to do this online, it'll always live there. So file, config, movies.yml. Okay, we're going to hit save there. Okay, let's run it. So it's going to run that again. And it should create action only, baby. We got it. Action only. Where's my horror? There's my comedy only, baby. Now where's my horror? What happened to my horror only, baby? House of the Dead. What the heck? Are you not? Oh, right. I only have one horror movie. So horror baby is literally the one poster. Okay. But you guys see what's going on, right? You saw that, right? So again, we have the comedy only baby here. Sort title is comedy only baby. Notice how it's part of the library. It's kind of hidden in there. If you really wanted, you want to put sort titles kind of like this with a exclamation 020. If you really want to handle it like that, if you were to do it that way and do it this way, I'm going to change it back, but it would push it up and keep your library free. So that's something to consider, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to kind of show what's going on there. So again, with the local walkthrough, I don't believe that's something that they did. But yeah, they just called it recent comedy, and they show it after at the end, but really the reality is it gets injected kind of in the middle of your library, and you're kind of like, where did it go? Well, what if you don't want the collections to show in that manner, right? Like interspersed in the library next to the titles. So there is a way where you can utilize something called, let's take a look here. If we look under files and builders and we look under essentially definition component interview, there are a few different types of attributes that can be given to any collection overlay or playlist file. So builders are attributes that tell PMM what items belong in a collection and overlay. So again, builders is going to be Plex search, iMDB chart, iMDB search. Again, it's your builders, right? It's here. And there's filters as well. And a lot of these are top level attributes for definitions. So one of them is settings. Settings can, so if we take a look again, this is the definition settings for how to schedule certain collections. You could schedule certain collections. You may want to be careful about doing that for overlay files. Remember, you want to have it to where all the overlays are put in at the same time. So your schedule is more for like collection based stuff, in my opinion. It can get a little tricky with overlays and you really don't want to do that. But so this is the settings, definition settings. This is the collection playlist metadata. So one of the things I wanted to do is, hey, I want to put it next to the iMDB collection so you can add something here. So again, it's a top level. So this is the builder, Plex search, right? Remember the dumb builder? So what I want to do is sort title. Notice how it's a top level. See? Action only baby, top level, and sort title is also the top level. Same level as Plex search. It's not in Plex search because it's not a component of Plex search. One I want to do is sort title. So a sort title for all of these. So I'm just going to copy paste, and lastly paste there, sort title. And so I can put like +1 action only, you know, action only baby, stuff like that. So let's take a look. So sort type, if we actually click updates, so this is the playlist update, there's sort title. So it says you can promote with a plus or a minus. Notice one of the things here is once you set the collection's title, you cannot change it. You can't alter it. Notice here how I put comedy only baby with an E. It created a whole separate collection. So it's not altering that. So again, that's one of those things that you have to know, is that when you're editing collections like this is kind of what occurs there. Let's see what happens if we change the genre from comedy to drama. Okay, comedy only baby. We've changed it. Let's run it. And again, it should just create updated titles. There we go. Drama's in there now. But notice it still has the comedies in there. So it's like, wait a minute. Probably just going to do sync mode. So that's another thing that we have to consider. So sync mode, sync. So we definitely want to put that in there. And again, sync mode, sync, sync mode, sync. Let's hit OK. And let's go ahead and run that. See what it does to comedy only baby. It should remove disaster movie. There we go. Notice that. So sync mode is really important to sync, to remove. By default, I believe it does just do append. It's just by default, it's doing append. Default sync mode settings value in the config file. Okay. Oh, so it's in the config file. And then let's see, sync mode. What's the default? Append, of course. Let's go ahead and just rename this to drama only baby. We've removed comedy only baby, right, from the config file, but will it remove the collection? Or will it just create a separate one called drama only baby? Yep. Notice comedy only baby is still there, so it's not removing anything. So let's see here. So one of the ways we can remove collections, and I want to talk about this because now notice we have comedy only baby, because notice it's just adding it, right? Is because by default, delete collections here is something that we need to have. And it's a library operation. Collection must be unmanaged to delete, must be managed to delete, must be configured to delete, must be unconfigured to be deleted. So again, so if we look at here, we can set it to several things. So I can do configured collection is not in the collection must be unconfigured to be deleted. Okay. So for example, if I'm changing around names, I want to do configured true. Okay. So, oh no, I want to do configured false. Must be unconfigured. If I do configured true, that means the collection is in there and I want to delete it. So don't make that mistake. So we'll do that. We're going to add an operations here for the movies. And we're going to do delete collections. And then we're going to hit collections. And we're going to do configured false. And then managed true. This should handle essentially what got duplicated here is what we want to do. So let's go ahead and run it. So let's see what is defined. Action only baby, horror baby, and drama only baby should exist. Comedy only baby should get removed. Okay. So let's see here. Let's run it. And that should remove, there we go. Comedy only baby got removed. And then we got drama only baby, action only baby, and horror baby. Perfect. So that is working splendiferously. On the subject of default collections, I mostly do the awards, and that's what I like to use. But you can look through this list and see what else you want. For example, holiday specific collections or seasonal collections. So if we go under time and seasonal, there's even a template for that. So it's going to be very unlikely that you're going to need to create your own files and builders, but we're going to discuss that as well, because in my case, for example, I did need a custom overlay file for the Looney Tunes mixed and match episodes that I discussed in terms of, remember, creating assets for episodes only, utilizing grab all posters, versus just not having any sort of asset handling with grab all posters. In a way, I want Title Card Maker and Plex Meta Manager to work together. So I use Title Card Maker to source my episode title cards, and then Plex Meta Manager's overlay file to apply overlays for specific mixed collections like Looney Tunes, which have multiple qualities, as an overlay for per file. That way I get the best of both worlds. In that instance, I would need to create a custom overlay, whereas the defaults don't work. For most of you guys, however, the defaults are probably all you're going to need. Take a look through all the defaults. And if not, then you're probably going to want to really dig into files and builders to make your own collection files and overlay files. But for the most part, a lot of you won't necessarily need to make your own collection overlay files. Let's talk about overlays for a second. So overlay files, not just overlays. Overlay files are simply a way that if you don't have your defaults serving your purposes, you can utilize overlay files. And obviously for overlay files, collection files, or, even playlist files, you can use builders, you can use filters, with set builders, and gosh, what else can you do? You can do Radarr and Sonarr settings. You can also do collection playlist metadata updates, TMDB person. All these things can be utilized in terms of the attributes that can help to make things the way you want to make them. The scope of it is pretty exhausting, so it's not going to be easy to cover it all. But let's go ahead and cover something very straightforward. So movies.yml, you can notice that it simply starts with overlays. This is a required attribute, followed by the name of essentially your overlay. And this is usually supposed to match the asset of your overlay, the 4K here. And if we take a look at Plex Meta Manager's defaults, we can simply see under overlays, images. Actually, nope, this is defaults for the other overlay stuff like ratings. Here we have pictures of the Rotten Tomato stuff. I was actually trying to look for this earlier, so I'm glad I kind of ran into it. But we can utilize either, I think there's in one example here, they utilize ribbon, yellow, iMDB. So ribbon, yellow, iMDB is probably here. There it is. So you can utilize a PMM default overlay image, or what you can do is if you go look under config, you can see that they include under overlays 1, 2, and 3. They include 4K. Let's take a look at this file. Dolby, and finally HDR. These are just straightforward PNG files. And the resolution should be, I believe, 1000 by 1500. Yep. Because if we take a look at Plex Meta Manager's assets folders, let's take a look at Captain America, for example. It should be 2000 by, I want to say 3000. Yeah, 2000 by 3000. So 2000 by 3000 is actually, if you divide it, the aspect ratio is 0.66666 times 10 to the whatever, 7. So if you take 1000 divided by 1500, you get the exact same aspect ratio. So even though there's more resolution on these posters, right, than the overlay, at the end of the day, Plex is going to shrink it down to whatever it shrinks it down. And that aspect ratio of the overlay will size up or down as needed. So again, one of the things that they tell you is, hey, listen, your overlays must be the placement of your overlays assumes that it's a 1000 by 1500. If an overlay is not 1000 by 1500, you will need to use positional attributes, meaning horizontal offset, horizontal align, vertical offset, vertical line, top, center, bottom, or left, center, right for horizontal. So positional attributes are just, you could put it anywhere on the image kind of randomly using coordinates. Or if you have it perfectly matching 1000 by 1500 in terms of the image size, then with that canvas size, you can put it wherever you want and know it'll hit exactly where it needs to. So that's a little complex, but for example, here, they know it's going to hit the top of the images. Here, they put it to the left. This is just a way to avoid positional attribute stuff in terms of overlays. I believe they probably gave a positional, let me see, vertical offset. Yeah, right here. Positional image overlays can be of any size. So again, let's take a look at that ribbon one actually in defaults, overlays, images, and ribbon, yellow. Notice that this is not 1000 by whatever. This is 351 by 351. So this would be a positional image, right? Because if you just put it on, Plex wouldn't know how to scale it. So that's all that they're mentioning up there in terms of this big paragraph is that, hey, understand something here. Make sure that you either match that aspect ratio of 2000 by 3000 for the poster, or you're going to be guessing coordinates. So in this example, I'm using the 4K overlay, but I'm using a dumb Plex builder that searches the entire library and applies it for anything with a resolution of 480. Why am I doing this? Just because I don't have 4K stuff in this test library. So I'm just trying to show you what that will look like. Here's our library with no overlays applied, nothing. The collections are still there. So let's go ahead and run Plex Meta Manager as it is. And let's go ahead and just show this one more time. That's the overlays. And then once again, we have to reference the overlays. Why is that there? We have to reference the overlays right here under Ovelray Files category, okay? So let's go ahead and run this. You could see here that I have 4K in HDR, and whatever's at the bottom will overlay whatever's at the top. So these will always be to the front. Remember that. So we're going to run this script here. Make sure we have remove overlays set to false. You'll be surprised how many times I've messed that up. Run it. And now we're going to take a look at what that does for the overlays. And there we go. We can see HDR is on top of the 4K Ultra HD. If these were reversed like this, HDR and 4K, then obviously the 4K would get brought to the front. Think of it like Photoshop layers, if you will. So you want to be careful of how that's being done. And again, for more specific information in terms of overlays, check this whole research, this wiki out. Again, it has a lot of information in terms of definition settings that can be a part of this, templates, and, you know, obviously external template references at the top level. And then, of course, multiple types of attributes can be utilized within an overlay. Here we are using the dumb Plex builder. You can also use filters, but you can also go here and do settings. Not really schedule, not really that, but maybe builder level, right? For, let's say you're doing some overlay for the TV shows, right? And so you may want to do builder level in terms of the season posters or the episode title cards, right? Or let's discuss something now called definition templates. Collections, overlays, metadata, and playlists are technically considered the definition files, right? And then we use a bunch of attributes and template variables to extenuate the details of these definitions. So there's something called templates, and templates is what you know, give or take what you expect. If you know that you're going to create a collection and a lot of the values are going to be very much the same. For example, in here, we're creating two collections, the Robert Downey and Chris Pratt. And we are doing a Plex dummy search through the actor for the TMDB, and then for TMDB person, we did 73457. So collection playlist metadata update. TMDB person changes the summary and poster to a TMDB person's biography and profile to the first specified person, as well as allow the people specified to be used in Plex searches. Okay, so this will automatically set the summary and poster of our collection to whatever the TMDB person is. So this is actually a collection update. This is one of the attributes, the definition attributes you can use. So I wasn't aware of this. I thought it was a Plex dummy search for a TMDB search, which also has something called TMDB actor. So my mistake. I just see there's a lot of variables that, unless you are an encyclopedia, where you just literally spend time like a monk, just really absorbing this, you won't know every nuance of every variable. And that's why the wiki it's a must. But so we have a lot of these things. So you can see TMDB person, sort title, sync, and collection order are constantly recurring. So imagine if I had to do this like for 30 actors, right? Of 30 of my most favorite actors. God, how annoying would that be, right? For me to have to constantly copy, paste. Okay, instead of Chris Pratt, I want, Christian Bale. Actor, what was his TMDB person? Okay, search him, all this stuff, put it in. Okay, +3, Christian Bale. I want him to show up after Chris Pratt. Sync mode, sync. So, you could do it that way, or you can do a template. So that's what we can definitely do. So let's stick to these two. So the template is simply something that is, you can either reference it in two ways. You can reference it right in the collections by announcing that you're going to be using a template, or you can reference it as in terms of an external template. So let's take a look at you can also reference it by just doing external templates. You could do it this way, or you could do it this way. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to reference it in the same collection that is using the template. If we take a look here and we'll look at the example here together, we can see what they're doing here simply is they're adding templates, and then they're adding something called, they're adding a name for this template, okay? It's called actor. So officially this template is called the actor template. That's what this template is. Then we build, right? So we're literally, notice kind of what's happening here. You're copying out this sort of thing going on, this sort of thing. But instead, we're going to add template variables. So actor Plex search, okay? And then the next one would probably be all, okay? And then after all, we're going to have actor TMDB, right? So notice how everything is the same between these two, except Robert Downey has been replaced by actor. This is known as the mapping name, or the name of the template file. It can be arbitrary. What matters is, and they mention it here, the name attribute is what tells the template call which template to use. Its value must correspond exactly to the template mapping name you want to call. So again, if I can just, right here, the name of the template and template variables that you define are arbitrary, but they must match exactly between the definition and the template call. So the template definition is going to be this file, right? This definition. And the template call is going to be what we're going to use in the collections. How are we calling this bad boy, right? So what it's saying is you can have whatever freaking name for actor. You can have, you know, bananas here. And as long as you have bananas in the collections calling that template, it will understand. So what really changes a lot in terms of the template variable? What are the values here that change? Well, so let's see. We know that sync mode doesn't change. Collection order doesn't change. Oh, right. These two change. TMDB person and sort order, right? So again, so actor. And then for TMDB person, let's just go ahead and kind of copy our template. This would probably be a lot easier if I did it that way. And instead of TMDB person, let's make it a template variable. Let's just call it person. Okay, that's the template variable. And for sort title, there are template variables: collection name, playlist name, overlay name. Mapping name is the mapping name for the definition, original mapping name in the YAML file. These are, every template has access to these template variables. So what that means is these will fill in automatically. So for TMDB person, I did person, right? Let's see what they did. They did person. But for the sort title, they're going, okay, instead of exclamation underscore, you know, why are you going to go through the extra work? Just go collection name. And so now what it's going to do is as it's making the collection and it looks at this template variable, it's going to know, oh, fill it in with Robert Downey. See what's happening here? So again, this is template definition at its core. Speaking of actor and collection name, one of the things is that all of the templates, any template that you create, has access to all of these settings. For example, collection name, playlist name, overlay name, which is the name of the definition that is, you know, essentially using that template. So it can find that based on the structure. Next is the mapping name. Okay, the mapping name. And the mapping name is usually the name right underneath the required word, whether it be collections or dynamic collections, etc. It's always the second line. So in this case, the mapping name of the template is actor. So it can also have collection sort and playlist sort. Library type, such as, movie, show, artist, video. So a common example use case for library type is if you're using the title format attribute, which is an attribute exclusive to dynamicCollections to define how those are going to be named. You can define it with that. And we're going to talk about dynamicCollections very shortly. Now, sync mode, of course, again, probably this is the easiest way to do it, is just copy, paste. And you can kind of see what's happening is we're creating essentially a template, right? And we're creating this very straightforward template. Okay, so that's our template right here. This is the template definition. Actor, Plex, this, that. So now how are we going to convert this bad boy here that we wrote, this template definition file, to the template call file? How are we going to do that? Well, it's quite simple. You know how we built the template definition file? By first finding all the things that essentially stay the same, right? Everything that stays the same with it. So you know how we kind of attempted to see everything that stays the same and then put the template variables for the things that don't stay the same in there? Well, that's pretty straightforward. Now, this is where we're going to define it. So for my collections, Robert Downey, right? We're still going to put Robert Downey, but instead, right, because we still want the collection name to be there, where instead of all of this stuff, right, instead of all of that, all we now have to do is just type template. And there's two ways to define it. You could define it extended or inline. So you could go template name actor. Okay, that's how you can call that, because look, the name of this template was actor. Okay, or you could do it this way. You go template and then name actor. So that's another way for basically writing kind of this whole, this sort of file block like that. So let's stick to just inline. So template name actor. Now we're basically telling it, hey, look, when you're making the collection Robert Downey, bring this up. Now, anything that's not part of the name is considered your template variable. So these with the pretty much the less than greater than signs is your template variables. So what we want to do is we want to define it for Robert Downey. So in this instance, we would just simply put, comma, person, reference that. And then we know that TMDB person is the person ID for Robert Downey, which I think is 3223. How would I know that? TMDB, Robert Downey Jr., 3223. Oh my goodness. I'm a freak of nature. And I don't even like the Avengers. So why do I know this? 3223 is Robert Downey. So what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, I'm going to use your template actor. I'm going to plop Robert Downey for collection name and person for wherever it says person. The person key 3223 for the person template variable in the definition file. Same for Chris Pratt, right? Same for Chris Pratt. Template, name, use that same thing. Person, oh gosh, why did I not save? Goodness gracious. Okay. So here we go. Name Chris Pratt here. And of course, the template, name, actor, person, boom. So now let's hit save there. So now we have a template definition file and a template call file. Now keep in mind, definition templates can be used whether for, in this case, we're doing it for the collections, but I'm pretty sure you can also utilize it for overlay files. Yep, right here. You could that's the whole point of templates. You could also reference it in Ovelray files. These are called template definitions. They can kind of be set to at the top. So if you have, let's say, a certain variable where, you know, if you wanted to define it default, you know, for, let's say, sync mode, you know, append, right? And essentially you want to give it a custom name. That's right. So like a custom name, for example, Fantastic Sync Mode Append. So when you go to call right here in sync mode in the template, you could just type Fantastic Sync Mode. So it will know based on the default file here, which also apparently I did wrong. Oops, it has to be underneath the actor file. Yikes. It has to be underneath the actor file. Then it will know that the Fantastic Sync Mode would mean append. You know, for me, I don't really know why this would be that useful. But again, I'm sure, you know, all in good time. So in fact, we're just going to go ahead and save that out here. And let's go ahead and build this puppy. One thing I want to tell you guys is I did mess up. I forgot to put a colon Plex search. Shout out Chihiro for helping me there on Discord and making me just want to give up on everything. So that can happen. That can really happen and mess you up. And you're like, I know I understand it. So what's wrong here? I forgot the little colon. It reminds me of it really reminds me of the cross-seed configuration file with the commas after everything. And if you missed one comma, you're screwed. So I don't know how these guys do it, how they code like this, but okay, let's run it. Okay, now, my gosh. Oh, I see Robert Downey. There he is. Where's Chris Pratt? And there we go. There's the TMDB person. Chris Pratt is first, right? Because the sword title is +1 Chris Pratt. C comes before +1R, right? +1R. Look at that. The summary has been filled out. The poster has been changed to Robert Downey. Perfect. There we go. There's everything. There's our files right in there. And so, of course, we have all the Iron Mans in there, Avengers in there. And, of course, you know, there it is, Iron Man 3, Avengers, all of those guys are in there. Okay, so that, in a nutshell, is definition templates. So what was it again? It's a template definition and something that either it's a collection, an overlay, a metadata, or even a playlist file that is utilizing that template name, in this case, actor, to quickly fill in things if you know that you're going to be doing multiple versions of that kind of collection. It saves you from having to type or copy paste a bunch of crap. So that is templates or definition templates. I want to define another example that's going to make definition templates and exactly template variables and all this more easier to understand. So I'm trying to give another example here. This is a somewhat advanced example of a template, but instead of a collection template, we're trying to do an overlay template, meaning we're using an overlay file and we're using essentially a template definition to define that overlay file. So on the what I have produced here is let's blow this up first a little bit. Let's blow this up to 25, shall we say. So we have an overlay here, overlays. So our script knows, okay, this is an overlays file, right? And then the mapping name's there, and then we define a builder to provide information. So we tell the builder, hey, get us anything with an audience rating greater than or equal to GTE of 7 or lower than or equal to 7.9. And then we're going to apply the following overlay. And by the way, guys, I am sourcing this essentially sort of example from Solon here. So he has a really interesting little config if you want to check it out. But I went ahead and converted it to this sort of non-code. So the overlay here is defined by the name RT_bronze. So this is the overlay name, or essentially the overlay name that will also point to the asset. So the asset will have to be RT_bronze. Okay. So here in the URL, he defines, his ribbon bottom right, because these are ribbon. This is essentially a Rotten Tomatoes ribbon overlay. And he says, okay, point it to RT bronze PNG. Group is in the awards group, and all of these have a weight on them. So if it's greater than or equal to 7, but less than or equal to 7.9, we're going to put bronze on it. If it's greater than or equal to 8 or less than or equal to 8.9, we're going to put silver on it. Interestingly enough, though, I'll say here the usage of weight here is a little redundant, because he put 598, 599. I'm not entirely sure why that is, because if Plex Builder's only searching for these values and those are silver, it will not assign any other overlay. So the weight basically means that in a group like awards, all of these overlays are in a group called awards. If the weight is 598, 599, 600, and there's like a conflict between the Plex, not just Plex, but between the builder, and there's like multiple possible overlays, weight basically says, okay, choose this one and ignore all the others. So let's say, for example, if the audience rating greater than or equal to was 7.0 and less than equal to 8.2, right? And then the RT Silver says, oh, audience rating from 8 to 8.9, then this one would win out for 8.2. So if something was 8.2, it fits into both of these overlay categories, right? So it would, obviously the overlay that would win out is RT Silver. That's all the weight attribute means. So in this example, I wouldn't let that confuse us too much, but let's focus on the repetition that's happening here. Builder, same name, right? Name attribute, URL, group. Anytime we're building a template, think of a skeleton, if you will. And we have to look at what's changing, right? Those will get defined by a template variable, possibly ones that are automatically fillable, right? Collection name, overlay name, etc. And there's a few others that aren't coming to my mind. I don't have them memorized. Or we can define a custom template variable for that. So here we can see that, again, let's think of what's staying the same. Group is pretty much staying the same, awards, though we can define that as a template variable, right? If we really wanted to. Sure, it's a little redundant, but we could do that. In fact, I believe on the example, it is that. And then we have essentially the name of these overlays right here, not the mapping name, but the name of the overlays right here. These are the mapping names, which match the overlay names. So though if name isn't provided, I will remember I mentioned that if a name isn't provided in the overlay, it's required, it will default to the mapping name. So it will automatically fill in RT Silver if that's not there. But RT Gold, so we're seeing here kind of what's kind of going on here. And we're seeing trending, and this is RT Bronze trending, 7 to 7.9. And this has a weight of 601, and a requirement has to be, it has to be trending daily 100. So these are now the trending for bronze, silver. Where's the gold trending? What is this? Oh, well, the gold trending, I guess, is give or take. It's probably there, but I may have accidentally removed it. Okay, I did accidentally remove it. Go figure. So imagine RT silver trending, and then there's RT gold trending. Now let's switch over here to this. So if you take a look here, we define a template and we call it rotten. We take what's kind of changing, right? Plex search all 7.0, 7.9, and we give it template variables. We say, okay, we're going to call this GTE. It could be whatever. Remember, it's arbitrary. What's important about these template variables is that whatever's calling them or defining them utilizes the same name that you give it. So GT, LT, these can be whatever you want. We could have called this, GTE rating. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to just stick to GTE. There's a Plex search, and you can kind of see what's happening. Notice the skeleton, right? Notice as I'm switching back and forth, it's a skeleton. Just like the franchise one, a little less complex, but it's a skeleton nonetheless. Just like the Bruce Lee, Chris Pratt, or Robert Downey, Chris Pratt example. So if we see here, we can see that we're giving names to whatever's changing. So ratings are changing, right? We give that the GT, LT. And also the weight is changing. Award, the group isn't changing, but we went ahead and just did that. Though here on the templates, we could just put group awards, right? And then of course, look at the name for that. So overlay name. So here it's grabbing, again, RT bronze, RT silver, because the overlay name is changing, right? But the cool part is it's going to automatically fill that in. And that's the kind of cool part. We don't have to like define overlay name. Just like the collection name example, remember with Robert Downey and Chris Pratt and TMDB person template for the TMDB builder. This one is utilizing a dummy Plex search all builder that filters by the audience rating, the Rotten Tomato audience rating, if you will. And well, technically it's just the audience rating. You can set it to rotten, and that's another whole thing. But what's interesting here is, and then we define the overlays, right? So now we're defining the overlays right here, template and overlays. Okay. You can always put this in a separate file and call, file, external template. I forget the nomenclature, but you can essentially just put an external templates attribute and then refer to that way. And we can see here that the overlays are defined like this in the YML file for the overlays, for the essentially the rotten.yml on his GitHub. This is how he does it. And you can see again, he mentions a name, group, awards. You can actually, to simplify it, you could have just not done that. We could just kind of remove it like that. And we could have just went, wait, GT, LT. And then boom, boom, boom. It's very simple. So you're not having to copy paste too much stuff. Personally, for me, I'm always kind of curious about it. When it's only like less than 50, maybe it's quicker to just copy paste, admittedly. But depending on the complexity of the template, it could be harder, give or take. So this is just another example of template definition, but instead of collections, this is overlays. Let's discuss something called dynamic collections. So we just talked about definition templates, right? Essentially how we use a template Okay. And then how we use it, that template, to create a series of collections that avoids a lot of repetition. Dynamic collections are essentially a subset of definition templates. So it builds upon that knowledge to dynamically create collections based on different criteria. For example, let's pretend we want to do collections based off of genres, right? So if I was doing a collections and I was doing, let's say I says, okay, collections, and then I went, okay, action movies, and I used a dummy Plex builder, right? Plex search all, but, you know, do limited to the genre, tag, action, sync mode. So I want this collection to sync in terms of if I remove, you know, certain things, it gets removed off of here, off of the collection. We're going to do sync, and then collection order it in terms of the release, right? The release year. So then I would do, okay, comedy movies. So it's having me, if I was to do this manually, I would have to consider every possible genre in my library. You can imagine, as simple as it sounds, just how extensive it can get and how much you would have to either copy and paste. But it's really not about that. You're probably thinking, well, you could copy paste pretty easily, but imagine having to guess all the genres that you do or don't have, right? What if you miss one or forget one? That's where dynamic collections comes into play. So essentially, let's go over this section by section. So each dynamic collection creates a set of collection definitions, meaning action movies, comedy movies, based on the thing being used to make them. So genres, countries, actors, or even track list names. So the type is what, there's a specific attribute that dynamic collection references called type. So by default, the collections generated will be named for the type being used to create them. Genres, countries, actors. So whatever is being used to create that dynamic collection creates a set of collection definitions based on some given criteria. And here's the key. It uses either the built-in default template or user-defined custom template. So if we look at dynamic collection, let's go into types for a second here. So there is a pre-configured list of types, right? Actor, director, writer, producer, genre. That's the one that's going to be important for us, that utilizes a template. So there is a template being used behind each of these. So if we look at genre, for example, fiery icon thing called default template. If we click it, and we can see it's using essentially a smart Plex builder, right, as its template. All these templates utilize some kind of builder. Remember, for collections, overlays, playlist files, any sort of thing that Plex Meta Manager utilizes, builders are a requirement. It's the thing that sources your data, right? If you remember that. So all of these don't necessarily use a smart builder. Some of them just use a Plex dummy builder. Some of them just use the TMDB builder in this case, but let's try to find a dummy Plex builder. I would think it would be in Origin, yeah. So here's a dummy Plex builder that just, well, this is a dummy builder, Plex all, it's dummy. And then it applies filters to that Plex dummy builder. And so it's saying, okay, origin country, and it's saying value. If we look at the template attribute, really, is that each dynamic collection type has its own default template. But if you want to define and use your own template, you can. Each template is passed a few template variables you can use. One is value, right? So I'm going to just use this here. So value is something you'll see a lot of. Another one you'll see is key. Again, key being the dynamic key. We're going to get into that. And then key name. So let's get into keys and key name and all that. A dictionary is anything that usually has essentially some kind of key and a value, right? So that's what a dictionary is. So in terms of the dynamic keys dictionary, right? A dynamic key, or key for short, is used to refer to a specific value from the dynamic collection criteria that will be used to create the collection. And so again, that will be utilizing this value to in terms of the templates to fill that in. Value just means spit out all the results of whatever the builder is. So in this case, in the case of genre, the value would be anything that essentially returns any genre. So it's all values of genre. So that's, again, what that at the bottom, the template attribute is saying, is that it's the list of keys and add-ons that come back from the builder. Okay. It's the list of keys. Now, key, in terms of the template variable that the template uses, simply just refers to the actual key that's spit out by the criteria builder that you utilize to create that dynamic collection. So in this case, it would be 10, which is a little weird, but then that leads to a key named Star Wars Collection. So by that logic, key is referencing whatever the criteria returns, in this case 10, which is TMDB collection. And then key name here you can utilize for title format, which actually names your dynamic collection. Title format is an attribute that names it. So if we take a look here, for example, how is a dynamic collection built? Well, it's simple. You can keep utilizing just what we call, if there's something called dynamic collection, I would refer to this as a static collection. So static collections, you can keep doing it this way, but dynamic collections utilizes this kind of announcement thing. It's essentially just like collections here. You must start a dynamic collection by putting dynamic collections at the top. Next up, there's a mapping name. Now, mapping name doesn't matter, but it has to be unique. Well, why does it have to be unique? Because each dynamic collection definition has a mapping name, which is also attached to the collection as a label to mark it as having been created by this dynamic collection. Basically, what that's saying is that, hey, look, whatever your mapping name is right underneath, that's what's going to be present on the label side, right? So in terms of the PMM default, if we look at label, it's PMM. But if we were to do dynamic collections, whatever we put here is going to become the unique name that's going to be posed on there. So if we have a genres dynamic collection, so we could just call it genres. And so this is where it kind of changes. So this is where we call the dynamic collection type. So type genre, right? And so at its core, what is this going to do? It's going to create the dynamic collection with essentially this genres label on them. And it's going to use the type genre. So if we look at genre, okay, and one of the things that we have to highlight is that all of these collections have essentially two attributes called type and data. So what does that mean? So type and data is used to specify the type of the dynamic collection, and data is required for any type, right, that uses the data attribute. So not all dynamic collections have a need for this. We're going to cover what data is as an exclusive parameter for dynamic collections a little bit later. So we're going to just stick to genre, but I'm going to show you guys. So in here, we have a breakdown. So type value is going to be genre. Yes. Type is. Now the data value is just simply not used. It's just not utilized at all. The key value is just going to be any genre, and the key name value is going to be any genre. So again, key name is going to be, if the key name is genre, okay, then what it's saying is it will spit out the name. So whatever the value is, it's going to be the same. So then you can utilize it in the title format. Title format is, what is the name, what is the title gonna be, right, of this collection? So the key name value is going to also be the name of the collection. So again, it's essentially doing something where it's creating a collection. So let's kind of look at what's really happening here. It's creating a collections, and it's basically doing, the key value, the key name. Remember, dynamic collections are based off of the name of whatever is being used, of the type being used to create it, the value coming back from that type attribute, right? So if the type attribute value being genre returns a key value of genre, then we know it's just going to call it whatever that is. So action or horror, right? Whatever. Very straightforward, etc. So, and the title format is going to be, it's telling it how to name this collection, right? Usually that's done by the top end area. We just change it like that. But in this instance, it's just altering it the way it's altering it. So it's essentially doing something where it's utilizing the smart filter, right? It's utilizing a smart filter builder, but it's plugging in for the value here, action. And it's just, it's automatically copying and pasting that for you then it does it for horror, right? And then for horror, it will just automatically change it to the value of the dynamic collection type, right? So it's a little hard to follow because we're constantly referring to, key name, type value, etc. But essentially that's what this is. Dynamic collections is doing, at least for the genres dynamic collection. It's automatically creating that. And then a title format, remember, one of those things that the dynamic collections can always utilize is the key name. These are always available, but dynamic templates have exclusive template variables such as key name and key and value that are passed to the template as well. In addition to those, it's these exclusive template variables, in addition to our previous knowledge of definition templates, that can allow us to dynamically create a large number of collections, really, without having to create too big of a collections file where we're having to type multiple actors' names or copy and paste a lot of genres over and over and things like that. Let's look at an example where dynamic key and the value is custom defined. So this is assuming that we want to reference something in the templates, okay? In the template section, we want to reference something called key, okay? And this template variable key utilizes an attribute called data for dynamic collections. That's really important. Usually in a static collection, if we say key, we have to manually define something called key on the left with a value on the right. Though in this instance, we're attempting to utilize a template variable key, but we're utilizing a list. And this list will allow us to automate the creation of multiple collections, just like all the other dynamic collection types. Here is an example with a streaming template. The top name, mapping name for this template is streaming. It is also referenced right here and streaming when utilizing dynamic collections. Remember, dynamic collections is essentially a collection, and it's a collection that is calling a template streaming to build that collection. Streaming here is essentially utilizing an MDB list. It's saying, okay, look at an MDB list right here, MDB list builders, MDB list underscore list. And then how do you define it? It's you show a URL. So it's using the MDB list to reference key, and data is saying, okay, on the left, we're going to give you the dynamic key, and on the right is the value. And in this case, the value is the key name. So these are the key names that I want you to spit out. BT, BritBox, Disney Plus. And on the left is the dynamic key. Remember, just like this example, we have a key, right, for TMDB, and then, or in other words, a key or a dynamic key or key. And then we have a key name, right? So the key name is what is that actually going to spit out in terms of a key name. And then the key name can be used in the title format to create the collection titles for each key the builder spits out. So in that example with custom, the keys are considered the dynamic key, and the values are considered the key name. And the key names that we're spitting out are these. So when we reference key name, it will know, okay, this is the data. So again, key and key name on the right to reference. Okay. And this is an attribute used only for dynamic collections. So if we go under dynamic collections definition attribute, we have type and data here. And again, used to specify the type of the dynamic collection and its data. So type is required and data is required for any type that uses the data attribute. This is more talking about in terms of the pre-configured templates, the default dynamic collection templates. Speaking to the developer, really the data value here is, again, it's a dictionary with the keys being the dynamic key and the values being the key name. So that is how this is utilized in terms of dynamic collections. The left side will always be whatever the key name is, okay? And realistically, you can call that anything, right? It's kind of arbitrary, but the right is whatever you really want to show up in the title, remember, because it gets referenced by key name. So this is a really interesting technical example of where this dynamic collection and data is essentially defining things that can be plugged back into the template automatically through a list of sorts. Usually when we have, let's say, a static collections, we have to define whatever's in these brackets in terms of the key, the template variable, manually. And, again, it's more of like a per collection template variable. So in the example of a static collection, this is what kind of, if you kind of, let's put this side by side here. Let me kind of blow this up a little bit. If you can kind of see, the left would be the dynamic collection template and the right would be just the standard collection definition template. So you can kind of see on the right hand side, I kind of converted it. I still called it a streaming. We use the same builders, the same sync mode, same everything. Though instead, obviously we don't have the template variable that's exclusive to dynamic collection, such as key. So I substituted it with one called collection name for the MDB list. And then, of course, under collections, instead of dynamic collections, right? This is where we have to, there's no real mapping name, right? It's not just one mapping name called streaming that acts as the label. Instead, we have multiple mapping names for all the separate collections. So just like the Robert Downey and Chris Pratt example, all for movies, right? Template, name, streaming, and then Apple TV movies, and then BritBox movies, and Disney Plus movies. So they're all being referred to like this. And if you'd, kind of want to change, the title format of all these, you'd have to kind of do it one by one, and one by one, you'd have to like manually like change it out, or perhaps use like, perhaps like one of, I'm not entirely sure, but maybe there's a better way to do it with item metadata. Well, not probably item metadata updates, but some kind of title update thing. And then it's just very tedious to essentially get the same thing. So you see both of these, whether it's the dynamic collection template on the left, okay, or the static collection template on the right, both of these kind of accomplish very similar things, just in different ways. Though obviously the dynamic collection template is going to be, in my opinion, a lot easier if you can plan ahead for it. Though in this case, the dynamic collections are being created very quickly and again, you can kind of see very automatically, in a very quick way. And again, this is only unique to dynamic collections. It's a quick way to really spit out collections very quickly. I would say that it's really worth reading this whole thing, seeing all the different kinds. I want to take a look-see at a more advanced example that I spend some time with to try to understand so that I can create a section on it. Dynamic templates essentially create collections without us having to define every collection name, etc. It can utilize that. You can use builders, right? Certain builders, smart builders, TMDB builders, to automatically get the key for the dynamic key that we're making a collection for. So what does that mean? So for TMDB collection, for example, we get a bunch of keys and from the TMDB API. And as explained to me by Yazora, that all the values for TMDB collection, or the dynamic key names, come from the API file as shown here. You can see 10 says Star Wars collection, 84, the ID 84 says Indiana Jones, 119, the Lord of the Rings collection. And so a lot of collections here, a lot of collections. We have about, 6,499 collections here. And so, there is a way for us to make our own static collection, right? If we wanted to do a Star Wars collection, we could just copy Star Wars collection. We can use under Star Wars collection, we can define certain builders. So let's say if we were to do TMDB builders, right? We could find every item in the TMDB collection, but let's say we were making our own Star Wars collection, right? Manually, without the use of a TMDB collection. Well, obviously we could theoretically just copy the TMDB collection, right? And do it that way. And this would create a collection with all the movies in here, which is fine. So we could certainly do it this way, and we can just really just keep doing this thing. Lord of the Rings collection, right? And we can define, so this is the Lord of the Rings collection link, but let's just say Star Wars, we'll just call this collection Star Wars, collection Lord of the Rings, and then we were to call this the Avengers collection, Avengers. And we can definitely make collections like this that would automatically grab certain movies, certain collections, and all this stuff, and then we can do Radarr, add, missing, true. We can turtles true. We can do collection mode hide items. We could alter it for this thing. But remember, the whole point of templates, and we can always do template. So here, if we were using a static collection to build something like this, I did TMDB collection. I put a template variable, right? A template variable is just saying, hey, something in the template call is going to replace that template variable in the brackets with a value. So whatever. So if you remember from that Robert Downey, Chris Pratt example, it's going to get replaced. So TMDB movie here is additional. So imagine if I have a collection like Star Wars collection, right? Collection ID, right? And then TMDB movie we'll just call movie. Let's do it this way. So if I was to convert this static collections into static collections using a template, I would simply say, okay, so Star Wars collection, and then of course, if you remember, we have to define the name of the template, in this case movies, and then finally the whatever the template variable is, right? So collection ID, I would put 10 movie. This is like any other movies that I want to be added. So if I go movie, so we can add multiple values here. And so when this collection gets created, imagine for a second, let's break it out. When this collection gets created, it's essentially going to create that collection based on this template, right? And the template is just, well, it's a template. So it's going to know, okay, for the Star Wars collection, it's going to create, right? It's going to essentially, let's pretend these are not a part of that. Let's just pretend you're looking at just this portion, okay? So the template would create something that looks like that, right? If you were to not use a template. And so the collection ID we defined as 10, right? So it's going to fill that value in. And then for the TMDB movie ID, the way it works is that the static version creates multiple TMDB movie builders, right? And just replaces its value. So it's going to go 100, 200, 300. So this is a okay way to essentially making a collection, but utilizing templates and making a static collection, if you will, right? If we have to do it this way, you can imagine trying to pick and choose. Oh, I have Ghosts in the Shell in my library now. That's 23026. Oh, now I have to make one for Ghosts in the Shell, right? So it can be very, very extremely tedious to do that. And so this is actually a great reason why dynamic collections exist. And dynamic collections will create this whole sort of static collection file, right? Like how it is here, collection, Star Wars collection, etc. But it can utilize a dynamic key source. In this case, it can utilize this entire friggin' list of 6,000 collections and do this work for us without us having to do it 6,000 times. Literally, that right? Because you'd have to, if you were just using a static collection, you had to define the name per collection. And then according to the builder, you're like, okay, the ID for Star Wars was 10. And then for Lord of the Rings, it was 119. And you can imagine this is pretty inhumane. Let's not forget the mapping name here. Let's just call this collections, right? This would get added as a label to whatever the dynamic collection being created, right, from this dynamic collection file. Then the type, we could simply say, okay, TMDB collection. And then we don't have to worry about all of this stuff, right? And one of the things that is utilized in terms of a dynamic collection and its template is, remember we discussed key in terms of the custom dynamic type. We discussed key name, and we also had value. So these three things are incredibly important, and they're going to be able to allow us to do some pretty advanced things. And we're gonna essentially be able to do something where everything will get filled in automatically. Dynamic collections leverages templates to do that automatically without us having to specify certain keys for the builder. We don't have to always specify, oh, for TMDB collection, it's going to be a collection ID that I'll have to manually state in there. So TMDB collection, so it utilizes this one, TMDB collection details. It finds every item in the TMDB collection and updates the collection with the summary, poster, and background from TMDB collection. So one thing to note is when you specify the type right here, when you say type TMDB collection, it utilizes this template to create collections. So every collection will have a minimum of 2 items and a TMDB collections detail on each collection. And it knows based on the type TMDB collection that it's going to look at this file, right? So we know that automatically by saying type TMDB collection, we don't have to actually even put in the template TMDB collection. We don't have to do that because it's assuming, oh, I'm going to utilize the TMDB collection builder to source all these things, these dynamic keys to fill in where they need to be for the key template variables. So if we were doing TMDB collection, automatically it knows, okay, I'm going to start looking at the list of keys and just start filling in the value for the key template variable automatically. When we didn't have a dynamic collection, we were having to define basically the value for TMDB collection, right? In terms of 10, 84, 1119, 131. So the dynamic type, this TMDB collection type automatically will fill in all of these dynamic keys without us having to say, oh, use TMDB collection builder. It automatically knows. So we all we really have to define now is, in order to create a collection, is we can add certain things. We can certainly do TMDB movie, right? We can definitely do TMDB movie if we wanted to make additions to the TMDB collections, similar to how we did movie 100, 200, 300 being added next to whatever movies it says is underneath the Lord of the Rings collection, right? ID 119, the key, the name being this. And then each of these keys already have a value, which are TMDB IDs, 100, 200, 300. We can still do that, TMDB movie, but we can also leave it up to a user input. So instead of just, TMDB, we can do TMDB movie. We can do something like movie key. And so when someone defines this, if a user defines movie _ 10 as, depending on the spin-offs they want to add, when PMM runs this dynamic collection, it runs it per dynamic key and it creates the collection. So when it runs the dynamic key 10, it will fill in TMDB movie here and replace all instance of key with 10, if that makes sense, and then add these values to it and essentially plug it in there to TMDB movie and into that template. Because it's a dynamic template, it already knows, oh, I'm looking for the dynamic key 84, the dynamic key. So remember, we get key, and then we get key name, and then we get value being utilized. Right here, TMDB collection details is a value. We're not, again, TMDB collection details is the value of whatever that is, whatever that brings back. But in terms of TMDB movie, right? TMDB movie isn't going to just automatically return a value. It's more like you have to give it values. So in that instance, you don't just put value, you have to put a key, movie key or something like this. Though not just a key, but, you know, more than that. Something that we can define, because if we just put key, it would just assume TMDB movie 84, and that's not going to do any, or 84, right? No, that's not going to help, because we're trying to make it so that it can detect additional titles and automatically create those builders without us having to specify 6,500 keys to do that. So how do we give it a database of stuff where it just knows? And it can create collections from our entire library from 6,000 source keys. Imagine we can potentially have 6,000 collections if we have all these movies. This is a very basic example that I'm covering so far in terms of how we went from a template with a definition template file to make collections. But instead, we can utilize dynamic collections to essentially make 6,000 collections, right? Without having to do it manually. And this is a great example. Let's take a look at a franchise collection. So if we zoom out, well, in fact, I can't really zoom out here, but I'm going to have to maybe... Nope. If we take a look, let's change the settings of the font. If we do this to 12, and I want you guys to kind of see, now this might look really minor, but I'm just trying to show you an overview of this template. We have these blocks, right? And so this is the franchise default template. And this is obviously a dynamic collection. How do I know that? Because right here, it says dynamic collections. The mapping name is called TMDB collections, and then the type is TMDB collection. So this is where it's sourcing its, essentially for the TMDB collection builder, this is where it's sourcing all of the keys that TMDB collection asks for, really. So while TMDB collection is something where you can give it the link of a list, TMDB collection in this case is all of these numbers on the left, and of course it's going to produce these names on the right, these key names. So it knows, okay, whoever the user is, he or she wants to create all these 6,000 collections. And here are the IDs for them. And it knows, essentially based on the builder, it knows the default link is HTTPS. So it fills that in for us, essentially. This is not in the template because when we use type TMDB collection, it's automatically putting it there behind the scenes, if you will. So we don't have to worry about putting it into our template. So that's why it's not there. If you look, there is nothing under the templates right here, the template section, the skeleton, as Yozora calls it, that utilizes TMDB collection, the TMDB _ collection, because it already knows, okay, you want to create collections for all of these. And that's the whole point of the type. You're giving it all the keys, all the dynamic keys that function as, you know how we had it say, Star Wars collection, right? Lord of the Rings collection, Avengers collection. Instead of us naming it and giving it a TMDB collection name, it's able to sort of switch these two things. So it's able to make with a title format. It's able to make it with the ID. So instead of Lord of the Rings here, right? This would be the key. So Lord of the Rings, for example, is 119. So 119, so it can automatically kind of do something like this, where based on 119, it'll create a name, and based on 119, it'll automatically fill it in with TMDB collection key, right? Something like this. So we just don't see that in the template because this is behind the scenes. So that's not there in the template. So this is the dynamic collection, TMDB collection. And you could see it says remove suffix collection. So from all of these, don't add the word collection. And we have certain things. So let's kind of look really just kind of outside evaluate this before we get a little more in detail. This is the template. That's the skeleton. This dynamic collection, etc., is any additional template variables that we need to give it. So template variable here, or any sort of add-ons that we may want to do. And that, again, so these sort of dynamic collection attributes are right here, dynamic collection template variables. When calling a collection file with dynamic collection, all the following are automatically accepted as template variables, which will just replace the same attribute when running the file. So if we look here, we could see remove suffix, custom keys. Right here, remove suffix, custom keys, add-ons, title override, right? Title override is on here as well. Key name override, title formats. All this, the title format is here, right? Title format, what else we got? And while yes, in terms of dynamic collections, these are attributes. In terms of if we were to actually call this collection file in the config, we can utilize these as template variables, right? So we can, for example, we can do something like -- file, we call the YML, and then we do template variables, and then we can change it. Data, data would be key, value. We could change the data template variable within our dynamic collections file. We can change the add-ons. We can change the custom keys. We can append to data, remove from exclude, append to include. Yeah, okay, so remember, anything underneath name in the template file is considered a template variable, right? Because it's a template variable. It's a name used in the variable, in the skeleton. So similarly here in the dynamic collection file, these custom keys, remove suffix, you could certainly move it up to the template variable, but remember the template variable is for things that are changing. And like while in a static collection, you would usually put these fixed ones into the template as well. You may as well just shorten the amount of static variables you're referencing in the actual collections portion of it. Here you don't have to, because when it creates these TMDB collections, it's kind of like it is in your template, because every single dynamic key will utilize these static attributes automatically. So you don't have to put it up here like a static collection, if that makes sense. So the whole point of the franchise collection is essentially to do what we mentioned, right? The collections. It's to make collections from this list. And so it calls TMDB collection. It removes the collection suffix. It calls the template. It gives add-ons. Now, add-ons are just a way for saying, hey, if I have a certain key and some other key, some parent key and some child, just don't create a separate collection for example, for Prometheus, right? So if we were to actually say Prometheus, so here, right, we can see it's creating a Prometheus collection, which is, Prometheus technically there's Prometheus, and then Prometheus there's that horrible sequel. So this is just saying, hey, combine the dynamic keys together, 8091 and then the Prometheus one. This is a way to combine dynamic keys. Anything that we know is a separate collection, please don't do it. Just incorporate it. Don't make a separate Minions collection. Make it part of the Despicable Me collection. So that's an add-on. Title overrides is pretty straightforward. So it's essentially the dynamic key and then the name we want to change it. So in this instance, we're just simply overriding the title entirely. Star Wars Skywalker Saga, whereas 10 on the source file is just Star Wars Collection. And then, of course, we have template variables. Now, template variables in terms of the dynamic collections section below templates, it's essentially a dictionary of dynamic key, or essentially the template we want to change, right? The template variable, there's a template variable called movie. And then a dictionary, right? A key and a value of the dynamic key whose template variable we want to change, movie. Movie is the template variable for this dynamic key that we want to change by adding 336560. The left collection, 448150, Deadpool's collection, the right would be the movie ID that I want to add. So this is being referenced. If we scroll up, now this is where things might get a little difficult. And when I first looked at it, I was pretty confused as well. We know that this is a template variable movie, but you know it's a huge list. So let's find the movie. Movie template variable. We can see that under default, which lists default template variables, we have a template variable called movie key, which is then defined by another template variable, movie, which is optional. So that's kind of interesting. So remember the list at the bottom, we had a dictionary of TMDB collection keys and then leading to values, right? So that would fill in here where it's the template movie, and then it functions as the default for a movie key template variable. But where's the movie key template variable being used? TMDB movie is referencing that TMDB key template variable. So this is a little bit interesting. We have something where I think it's like linked and nested template variables, one inside of another, which is weird. So in our file, we gave these various dynamic keys, and then we gave values, right? And then we gave another value here, which is technically the TMDB ID of, let's say, barbershop, beauty shop. So it will, wherever it says movie, if someone were to define under their template variable, movie underscore key in the config file, right? So if someone were to say movie underscore 10, so someone were to do it this way, it would override the defaults, right? So the default is saying, hey, look for something called movie key, whose value is movie, which is an optional value. It doesn't need to be there if this is something that we're adding, right? So movie key is saying if you detect someone who puts a movie and then there's a key 105995 that matches my source of keys, I want you to put this value in there. So instead of movie, right? Because it might seem a little confusing because the movie template variable here is defining a dictionary. So you might be thinking, hey, wouldn't it look like this if it were filling in the value, right? Wouldn't it do that? Well, yes and no. So remember, dynamicCollections is sourcing the dynamic keys from that collections file, but it's able to determine, okay, there's a key here, and then there's a dictionary with a dynamic key. So it's able to basically cut that out and do something like this. You see, if when it's running, that's what that looks like. So movie 10.995.33650. And so if we remember something, is that this, and then this movie key is being, the way it's adding it is with a TMDB movie builder by referencing, now it's referencing movie key template variable, which is up here, right? In the default, we define it as movie, which is optional. So movie key, right? Movie key would be 33650, right? So you would think, okay, if it's defining TMDB movie as movie key, well, movie key 105995 has the value 36560. So then what this is really doing is it's doing that. TMDB movie. Remember, dynamic collection, I think the confusing part when I was looking at the code was dynamic collections is running per key. Per individual key, 10, 84, 119. It's running this template and it's building this, imagine it's building the collection from this template over and over and over, utilizing just that one key. So everything from that one key would have one of these under the collections, right? Meaning, you know how it says Lord of the Rings collection, TMD, and then Avengers collection, So this would be essentially dynamic key. And then this would be all of this stuff here would be the template stuff, which is all of this stuff, all of it. This is how it's making each of these collections, right? And that's the whole point of dynamic collections. Though the difference is we're not having to define for the builder every single collection or 6,000 TMDB collection links. The hardest part, I think, for me to understand with all of this was, how is it able to plug the movie _ key in and know that that's the key? How does it know that 10, movie _ 10 means 10 is the key? Well, it's because it knows it checks against all of those dynamic keys. So when you utilize something called movie when the user utilizes something that matches the source dynamic keys that the dynamic collection type TMDB collection, right? Dynamic collection type TMDB collections using, it knows to always override. So it knows, again, remember the user's template variables will override anything in the file. Here, Radarr add missing. So it's saying, okay, find the value Radarr add missing key. So if the user defines Radarr add missing key in the template variables when he calls the file in the config, remember this section right here is me just, remember in the config, you have something called collection files, right? And then you go file blah config blah blah.yml, and then underneath that you would put your template variables, right? And then underneath that you would do something like this. So I'm going to leave that as the reference. So another one would be Radarr add missing 105995 true. So if I were to add missing _ 1059 true, right here, this thing is basically saying, hey, look for that in the template variables. Look for it in the template variables that the user defines. So if you want to make a template where you can define a key, this is kind of a way to do it. This is essentially how you can do it. So you're going to want to define that template variable. And then it references Radarr add missing as the value. And you go, okay, well, Radarr add missing is the value. And then you say, okay, so let's scroll down in this template. Radarr add missing. Well, that's an optional setting. Radarr add missing. It's an optional setting. And so again, remember for Radarr add missing key, it's referencing Radarr add missing, which is the optional. And apologies, I was constantly highlighting this one. But when you define it like this, Radarr add missing 105595 true, it looks at the right here. You see that? Radarr add missing key. So it looks for that kind of pattern. Radarr missing, and then 10.5.995 is the key. So then it will know, okay, to do that. If we weren't to put Radarr add missing anything and it was running, yeah, so Radarr add missing would try to look for Radarr add missing key. It would look in the default section, Radarr add missing key, Radarr add missing, and then it would see that it's not there. So if Radarr add missing key is given by the user in a template variable, great. Then it would override whatever value they gave. If they don't, the default says, go ahead and plug in Radarr underscore add underscore missing, which is also an optional variable. But you can also set that so that if somebody did want, instead of doing it per key, they can apply it to the entire set of dynamic keys or collections being created by this, essentially template for dynamic collections that we are using. And that way Radarr add missing can be applied to the whole collection set that's being generated. Sync mode key, okay, is sync mode. So sync mode key is looking for sync mode. Now this might be confusing because you're like, wait a minute. So first let's start from the bottom. Always start from the bottom of these templates. So this one, sync mode key, just means, hey, if somebody defines a sync mode key, use whatever value they put after that. So if they do, for example, sync mode 10.5.995 true, then when you're making the collection, just use true for that one dynamic key. Remember, every time these collections are being made, dynamic collections, it's going per key, 10, 84, 119, and it's running through your template and your template variables each time. So look at it that way. So sync mode true, right? So let's get rid of that and sync mode key. Now, if we did not define any sync mode key, either in the template variable or maybe somewhere in the dynamic collections file, right? Like if we put it in there, if we didn't define it there, then what sync mode key does is it says, okay, look for sync mode key. So it looks in default sync mode key, and then its value is defaulted by another template variable called sync mode. And if you look above it, sync mode has a value of sync. So it's doing sync for anything that isn't defined. Okay. So if it's not specifically user defined, it means run every collection ID and give it the default sync mode of sync. Unless you have sync mode key existing, right? If the sync mode key exists, then you can use whatever the user said. And if it doesn't, then you use the default sync mode key that I've given you here. So that's the thing that was really tripping me out when I was looking at the code. I was like, wait a minute. Sync mode key says sync mode. So wouldn't all of these right here, when it says sync mode key, wouldn't this always just default to sync? Right? Like how does it work? How does sync? I just don't understand what the hell is happening in these templates. And so I finally understood that, it's looking for a sync mode key. It's not automatically going to your default because again, whatever you define in your template variable as the user or underneath here will trump whatever's under default. So I didn't really understand the nuances of what default meant. And in some cases, that self-reference, so for example, here we have TMDB collection key referencing TMDB collection, which is optional. But obviously, for this template, seasonal collections, TMDB collection wouldn't really have any real default for every single movie, if that makes sense. So for all the keys, right? Because you wouldn't want to add one type of collection to every single dynamic key in this case. Like The Conjuring wouldn't be in Valentine's Day, right? It would only be for horror or technically Halloween. If we look at their file-specific variables, TMDB collection is just a key. It's not TMDB collection without a key. Because again, this whole TMDB collection is to add the following TMDB collection IDs to the specified keys collection. The key, the dynamic key being these seasons here. So some things are referenced like this with a default. At the end of the day, this TMDB collection gets put under optional. So while there is a default defined for if they weren't to put any key, it essentially nulls itself out. So it sees it's optional. There was nothing given for key, no TMDB collection key. It's just, it's a wipeout. It doesn't do anything. Now, if you're making collections and templates to share, then we're going to discuss nuances with the template variables attribute that's been a bit confusing. So let's pull out the official Oscars template. We can see that the external templates here refer to template variables as simply a key and a value, right? Now, when we were covering dynamic collections and the template variables, it wasn't really made clear that the template variables that it's talking about under definition templates, or technically dynamic collections, this template variable is its accepted value is a dictionary where the key is the template variable and value is another dictionary. So in this example, it's a dictionary where the key is the template variable we want to alter, and then the value is another dictionary, right? That's another set of keys on the left and values on the right. In this case, this is referencing URL poster template variable, my collection poster, right? And it's providing a dictionary. But in a dynamic collection, it utilizes, essentially it's building a bunch of collections based off of a key, right? Coming from a builder, a dynamic key being sourced from some builder. So the template variables, when you're making a dynamic collection, will need to be a dictionary for things, right? So when you do it that way, it's going to be a dictionary when you're defining it inside of dynamic collections. Now, when it comes to the end user, however, the end user does not use a dictionary, provided what they're editing is not the data template variable of your collection. So if you were to hand over your template to them, right, to share, they would call it with the file attribute, right? Config, my friend's template, etc. But now if we were to do -file, my friend's collection, our friend can go to alter the URL poster, assuming that for the dynamic collection, it's not something that requires a dynamic key, right? Because let's take a look at what's really happening in this example here. In this example, it's URL poster. So it's changing the poster of every dynamic collection being created. Poster of 119, 531241. And if you told the user that they could specify that, they would perhaps use it as a template variable, right? And on this side of it, they would put it as a template variable. But they might just put something like one image. So it doesn't really make sense in this context, because this one image one for URL poster would give literally every dynamic collection created the same image. So some things make sense as a template variable that for the end user, and some things don't. Let's take a look at it in terms of this example with this seasonal collection here. So they put an external template without any sort of collection section variable, right? Template variable. Then they defined an inline template right here with the templates tag. Okay, this is an inline template. It's called holiday. Because this is, even though it's seasonal, I guess they just called it holiday because it was probably inspired by holidays. Ironically, the dynamic collections is called seasonal, but you can see here collections, seasonal collections is calling a template, and this is not a dynamic collection. So remember, when we're referencing any of these, any sort of values that are template variables or that are in templates, we just put it like this. Or alternatively, remember, you could do something like this: separator inline, separator, separator template variable is going to be called seasonal, right? So in this template, though this isn't the template they're using, let's assume there's something where it's like seasonal like this, requiring probably for the separator key here, the separator key, the template variable separator should have the value of seasonal. Use separator false. So you could do it that way, or you could just simply do it this way, non-inline, where you just have it like this. And then for here, for dynamic collections, this is interesting. It's a custom one, and we've covered this already, but what I want to show is, notice how the template variables in here are dictionaries. So we have emoji, schedule, iMDB list. Everything is given in essentially a dictionary. See this TMDB movie? Even that's, even that's technically a list. Halloween, like that. So this TMDB movie is the template variable, and then this is where you can add lists. So you could do Valentine's, right? 112 8322 38229. You can kind of do it this way and provide this sort of, right, 8322 3829, and then you could. So this is a list, and notice that these are lists. Same for if you're referencing right within the dynamic collection, it's going to be a list. But let's say, for example, you gave this template seasonal to somebody. Well, they can define anything that's in the template, right? They can just define it outright, name, format, etc. Let's take a look at TMDB movie. Let's take a look at these variables for seasonal real quick. Let's see what the seasonal one is doing. We can see, again, the template variable here, use _ independence false. We see here there's two templates here, holiday, shared, R, that are being utilized from external templates. And if we look at shared, we can see these are the shared templates that are defined that are defined. Name key right there, summary right there. Whoever's using your collection file with the template in it, even if that template file is an external reference, they can define values utilizing just template variable for your file. So if you were to say file, template variable, etc., it would get defined even all the way to the external side. So let's pretend this is in the config, and then this is the external template, right? That all of these are referencing. External templates, all the templates here in files. Someone could technically just do URL_poster, and it should pick up into that external templates section as a template variable. And so that's kind of, that was a confusing part with template variables, because when I was making a custom, for example, collection, I referred to an inline template. I was used to just doing template variables, etc. But then for dynamic collections, template variables required a dictionary with the left side being the dynamic key from the builder, and the right side being the key name, or what we want the key name to be of that key, right? Essentially the dictionary. And then that was kind of tough to understand because at the bottom you have to use key names, dictionaries like this, like data and under seasonal. But don't forget that when you're defining it inside of a dynamic collection with template variables, it needs to be a dictionary. You can see that we have defined templates, an inline template called holiday, but also an external template. So the external template we can utilize, we can utilize any of these shared ones, use underscore key, right? That's a shared template variable. And yet we can just simply just do use underscore independence. But notice there's no, in the inline template, where is use? Remember, I couldn't find it. So I can't find the use underscore key in here because it's under templates. So when we do use underscore key right there, use underscore key is right here. So now we can see that it's part of shared, I'm pretty sure. Yep, shared. So there it is. So it does pass along template variables in that manner. So that's something to be aware of, is when you're crafting your own templates, when you're utilizing a dynamic collections, right? And you're trying to give it some kind of value in a template or some kind of reference from within here. You're trying to feed it something from within the dynamic collections. And you're trying to affect every single collection being made from a builder. Then you're going to use a dictionary. The easiest way to explain this would be in the instance of nested template variables, right? Ones where it's essentially been defined in the default, like movie key, which is defined by another template variable. So movie key here is being used as a template variable here with TMDB movie, and it's nested to movie. This is basically where you are the one that's giving it the movie underscore key. You're saying movie is this, underscore is 105995, right? And then this is the value. So when you do that, as I showed in the earlier example, if someone were to define movie underscore key, it just kind of fills in right directly to TMDB movie. That's different. But in the instance that they don't define it as a template variable, where it doesn't automatically replace this thing, these sort of template variable lists, essentially, right, dictionaries, will act like that, as if the user put movie underscore key, movie underscore key, movie underscore key, or title override underscore key, title override underscore key, name mapping underscore key. So this add-ons underscore key, right? So even though I believe for add-ons, it's not a per key thing. It's more like an append add-ons or just outright replace the entire add-ons list. You could now define per key add-ons if you wanted. So there is a way that you can follow this pattern from this franchise file or the seasonal file doing the same thing, where if they don't define it, then whatever you put on this list will just go all the way up here to movie. The key will get transferred here, and then this will get put under TMDB movie. I showed an example with actual numbers, if you remember, where we were showing how this was getting replaced by a number, this was getting replaced by 10, because every time it runs for each key. So that's a great explanation of kind of what's happening with these template variables. Let's just do one more from Director's Collections. But if you look at here, person offset, Richard Brooks, right? You could put Darth Vader. You add this here into template variables, which is changing a certain collection that's being made, its value. So here, TMDB person offset for the collection that would be called Darth Vader will get changed to 0, for example, or 1. Whereas let's say now you defined it in the dynamic collection itself, But if someone else got this file and they got this file, how are they going to alter this value if they wanted to? So this value is referencing TMDB person in external templates. So we go in external templates, TMDB person, and we can see kind of what the template variables are. So TMDB person offset key under director, right? TMDB person offset, and then there's a key there. This is just defining the dictionary, because remember, we are defining a dynamic collection. So if you are doing it inside of the file by default, you want to change the way the file kind of shows certain things first before the user can, you're going to have to do it this way. Now, if the user were to, however, say, okay, I don't like that Darth Vader has an offset of 1, this is kind of like saying TMDB person offset key, all of these individual ones, right? Because if you think about it, it's running TMDB person offset. So it's running this whole collection, right? One key, dynamic key at a time. Default, Richard Brooks, Darth Vader. So it already knows, recall from the earlier examples, when you give it a list like movie and you give it something like movie, it already knows, okay, so it's going to be movie key or TMDB person offset key. So this is automatically feeding values into here. So just like the movie example for franchise with TMDB movie, remember that where it said TMDB movie, and then there was a key called movie key. You guys remember that? And then there was a list at the bottom with movies, and well, let's just show it here. See right here, movie, and then here we go, movie key, movie, right? And then movie key was referenced inside of TMDB movie key. So right here, TMDB person offset key, TMDB person offset. So it knows kind of what's already going on. TMDB person offset is set to a default, which is optional. We could see it's set to a default, which is optional. TMDB person offset is TMDB person offset key. And then this is filling in values of TMDB person offset. Okay. That is coming from here, TMDB person offset. So for every offset, it knows, oh, it's simply looking at your list, seeing that there's a dynamic key and there's a value, right? There's a dictionary and there's a value. And then it's going into this file, trying to find the TMDB person offset template variable, right? Not the attribute, not the TMDB person attribute. Don't get confused. The template variable here. And it's plugging in the following. So it's plugging in this right here. Boom. And remember, it takes Richard Brooks and it recognizes that's the key, and it does this. And then TMDB person offset, we set it to TMDB person offset key. So it can detect, oh wait, TMDB person offset key. So it knows, oh, Richard Brooks, right? So if this was Richard Brooks, remember, every time it runs, it fills in the value of key. So it fills that in. And so then it knows, TMDB person Richard Brooks is here. It'll put 1 as the value for TMDB person offset. And so recall, so if we are defining TMDB person offset as a dictionary to replace this TMDB person offset attribute in terms of this template, TMDB person offset, right? Well, a person can theoretically just define this directly, TMDB person offset key. they can definitely define attributes for templates that you're utilizing in your collections. So if you have an external template, right, template variables, or in the case of dynamic collections here, it's utilizing the template TMDB person inside of that templates file, right, which has a bunch of templates in there, sections of templates, TMDB person like this, then they can define very easily that, oh, I want that key to, for a certain key, I want it to be this. Or you can do it internally through a list. And this list would, it's like you pretty much defining certain, it's basically you defining the TMDB person offset key value for them. But we don't have to put TMDB person offset key here. We're just putting TMDB person offset, right? Which feeds into, it feeds into here, TMDB person offset, which becomes TMDB person offset key, which loads into TMDB person offset. Not only does this sort of key thing under default define the default if the person doesn't define an outright key template variable when they're using your YML, but it also functions for us to feed our own values of TMDB person offset key, or technically we're doing TMDB person offset, right? And when it goes into here, it automatically sorts through, oh, he means per key. Or someone could just directly specify TMDB person offset key. There is a situation where, remember, with the franchise collection, we showed, for example, in sync mode, that we can define right in the default a certain sync. So somebody could theoretically, rather than doing sync mode key, they could define the overall default sync mode, right? They could just say, well, I want the sync mode template variable to be append for everything, not just a key. So they can also define that. Whereas, so in this example with TMDB person offset, they could theoretically just put TMDB person offset 2. So that way, even if there's no key defined, right, every single TMDB person, their summary would be offset by 2 for every collection. So in this case, if key is really nothing, TMDB person offset, if they do define it, would just be keyless, and then TMDB person offset would still reference that key variable, but it would replace it with just simply TMDB person offset the value for whatever they put. So if they put TMDB person offset 3, every single collection will always get 3. The key takeaway with this kind of code format that's being utilized across all these templates is that it allows them to use their own template variable underscore key value, or lets you also offer certain default fallbacks that are optional, or your own template variables list with a dictionary of default values that will come included per template variable in a template that you decide to share. So I highly suggest, if things aren't as clear, you stare at these for a long time like I did, and hopefully it makes more sense. Again, all of this is based off of our definition templates prerequisite that we had to learn. We had to learn what is a template, what essentially is a template doing. And then we learned about dynamic collections, right, where there's already all these collection types that utilize their own default templates, and then how we can quickly, spit out essentially dynamic collections on the fly without having to, manually define every genre. And again, it utilizes for the template attribute. You can utilize the value, you can utilize the key bracket or the key name. these are kind of what we can utilize. So again, dynamic collections, very powerful, very complex, very advanced. And often I think you perhaps may not need to make your own dynamic collection. I'm really not too certain how common it would be to want to make your own that's not already covered by a Plex Meta Manager default. But if you want to make your own dynamic collection with, let's say, your own sort of title formatting, for example, if you want to change how it spits out the title formatting, then you certainly can go about altering. I mean, honestly, at that point, if you know that a majority of your functions are already in a default, you may just want to edit the default. So if I know I like PMM year, am I going to try to rebuild the dynamic collection? Probably not. I'm probably not going to do that. So, best of, instead of, let's say I didn't want it to say best of 2020, even though this does make sense for the years that creates the best of categories, I could just edit this one, just say awesome, key name, library type S, awesome 2020 movies, awesome 2020 shows, right? So remember, these templates, they're not just, again, these can be utilized not just for movies, but for TV shows, etc., depending on that as well. So just some fun little stuff here just to kind of mention. If you want to edit the defaults, you certainly can now, because you understand which template variables are always available, right? We know that from our definition templates, the ones that is always available here would be library type, right? Every template has access to these template variables. And it's still not making sense. Remember, this video is a supplement. I can only cover so much. I can't cover every single variable, every single aspect of this. So I highly recommend you check out the wiki here. Well, guys, in summary, that's everything that I have to share. It's officially 3 hours and 46 minutes into the video. And I have to say that if you managed to watch it all through, kudos to you. It really is meant to be utilized with chapter markers. But hopefully catch you on the next one. If there's any questions or clarifications needed, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And take care. See you guys on the next one.